and a very good evening to you and welcome to the Full View on the eve of the country's 6th general election. I'm Criselda Lewis.
And I'm Tepiso Makwetla. And your headlines tonight. A message from the President on the eve of the country's general elections.
Let us go to the polls on the 8th of May and together determine our country's future.
And more than 20 people arrested after a community hall and clinic was torched at Viljoenskroon in the Free State.
Kwazulu-Natal police investigate alleged death threats against SABC officials in 3 municipalities.
A very good evening to you once again. Now, the IEC says at least 2 police officers will be deployed to each polling station around the country.
The deployment of police will vary depending on the volatility of different areas.
The Electoral Commission briefed the media on its state of readiness this afternoon.
There were some challenges encountered yesterday and in the early part of this morning. The Electoral Commission is encouraged to note that a significant decline in community protests this week. In those instances where protest action did continue, the South African police services were quick to intervene to restore calm. A minimum number of 2 police officers will be deployed to each voting station, and the SAPS will remain on high alert in high-risk areas to ensure no disruptions to the elections.
And the IEC says it's anticipating a smooth start to tomorrow's general elections, despite a handful of incidents which have raised concerns. Briefing the media this afternoon, Chief Electoral Officer Simon Mabolo said an electoral officer has been suspended for violating the Electoral Code.
In a video that went viral, a party agent could be seen assisting to place special ballot papers into a ballot box. The IEC has condemned this.
One apparent crime-related incident yesterday, a group of knife-wielding men confronted a group of election officials conducting home visits in Guyana and confiscated 93 unused provincial ballot papers, which they then destroyed. Fortunately, no one was injured, and the cast ballots, 7 of them, were secured and not affected. The SAPS were quick to respond, and 2 suspects have been arrested and are now in police custody. 2 vehicle accidents involving staff were reported over the past 2 days, but fortunately only minor injuries were sustained. The Electoral Commission is investigating reports of instances of the double envelope system not being used in certain parts of the country yesterday, as well as some ballots, sporadic incidents of some ballots that were not stamped at the back. The stamping of ballot papers immediately prior to them being issued to voters is an important security measure. These incidents were discussed in the National Party Liaison Committee this morning, which has made some recommendations to the Commission, including that the Commission accept the legitimacy of these ballots if verified. The Commission will ultimately make a decision on whether these ballots are included in the count or not. Additional reminders of the importance of stamping ballot papers and of the double envelope system were sent to presiding officers and deputy presiding officers today. The Electoral Commission has removed a deputy presiding officer from a voting station in Binoni, Ekurhuleni, following an investigation into a video showing a party agent assisting with the transfer of special votes from the special votes back into a ballot box at the voting station. Party agents are not permitted to handle any election material and may also observe and raise objections if circumstances necessitating that arise.
Meanwhile, residents of Tubialang in the Free State say they've lost hope in their municipality.
The Mafube municipality has been placed under administration.
Some residents here are still using the bucket system, and raw sewage is spilling onto the streets. These are just some of the issues residents are concerned about.
The municipality must do their job so they can fix all the things that's broken.
I am voting tomorrow because it's a done thing to do.
I'm happy for receiving pay. Now I want a house.
The Free State government says it will do all it can to assist distressed municipalities.
We have a plan to take them out. Unfortunately, because of the finances, it's not going to be easy for us just to let it go. That is why we are busy with the national. We have a task team that we have formed with Minister and National, the task team that is going to assist us to make sure that we take these municipalities out of Section 139(1)B.
The Premier has also appealed to residents of Marquard, where there's been violent protest, not to boycott the elections. Aphumelele Mdlalane, SABC News, Dwelling.
24 people have been arrested for public violence at Viljoenskroon in the Free State. This follows violent service delivery protests that resulted in the torching of a community hall and clinic. Angry residents are complaining about poor water supply, nepotism and unemployment. Tensions have been simmering between residents and local authorities for several weeks now. The Mokaga municipality has been on a knife's edge. Disgruntled residents have now taken their anger out on the streets, and learning and teaching have also been disrupted. They threaten to boycott tomorrow's elections. Let's hear more on the elections with Griselda.
Well, thank you very much, Tepiso. Now, on that particular story, SABC reporter Tabiso Khadebe is on the ground for us in Kroonstad this evening, but earlier he was in the Ramulutsi township in Viljoenskroon, where a hall and a clinic were torched. Tabiso, thank you very much for your time this evening. Let's talk about first what led to the incidents of arson in Viljoenskroon.
Griselda, according to the community, they were saying that there are outstanding issues that municipality was supposed to have responded to. They didn't respond. The municipality didn't respond. That's why they decided to go on the streets and then barricaded roads and then allegedly banned the clinic and also the hall. Those outstanding issues we're talking about, they're talking about stands. They have been looking for stands to build their own homes, and then they are talking about jobs being given to PALs, and also they are saying that projects in their community are given to friends. So that is why they decided to go into the streets and then ban the two halls. All right.
So Tabiso, these halls that were torched have been used for special votes over the past 2 days. Has the IEC stepped in with the alternatives for the big day tomorrow?
Fortunately, the IEC, following the banning of the community hall, the IEC managed to get an alternative venue to sort of accommodate those people who are doing voting, the special votes today, because the same hall was being used yesterday for the special votes, and then the protest happened overnight, and then that's where the hall was banned. And then this morning, after getting a report from the police, the IEC managed to get an alternative venue so that the special votes continue during the course of the day. And fortunately, the police were there. They managed to monitor the situation to ensure that everything goes according to plan, preparing for tomorrow's big day.
Tabiso, I understand as well that the Provincial Police Commissioner was in the area to try and quell tensions. Did he succeed in doing that? And has there been some assurance at all tonight that voting will proceed without any hindrance tomorrow?
He ensured the community, speaking with the media, he ensured the community that also he was speaking with the media to ensure the communities out there that those people who want to go and vote will do so peacefully without any incidents, and also appeal to the community to come down about their issues that will be discussed with the municipalities. And also the Premier of the Free State has sent a message to the communities, to the leaders in that community, or rather in that area in Viljoenskroon, to say that they must remain calm. The ANC government will sort of try and address those problems. It's not going to be an overnight thing to sort of address the issues of the community. We're talking stands, we're talking the joblessness in that community. So Messi Sintombela, who's the Premier of the Free State, saying that the community must go out there and exercise their right to vote, so that the ANC government continue to provide services to the people, and especially provide people with a better life.
All right, thank you very much for that. SABC reporter Thabiso Radebe, who's crossing to us from Kroonstad, but he had been monitoring those protests in Viljoenskroon, where residents are complaining over service delivery, and essentially you had some of the authorities having to step in when residents threatened that they will not allow the polling to continue there in that area tomorrow. But assurances now that everything will go ahead without hindrance in tomorrow's election. Tsepiso?
So, Crisalda, we continue with those hotspot areas. This time in Kwazulu-Natal, the Justice, Crime Prevention and Security Cluster, they're identifying several areas ahead of the 2019 general and provincial elections. Chairperson of the JCPS, MEC Mxolisi Kaunda, says in eThekwini, wards 4, 80, 99, 91, 45 and 102 have been identified as areas of concern. Our reporter Ayanda Mhlongo joins us now for an update on the special voting in Durban and more. Ayanda, a very good evening to you. Let's first start with how special voting commenced.
A very good evening to you, Tsepiso and Crisalda, coming to you from the Result Operating Centre here in Durban. Yes, well, a better day today, largely more calmer than from the incident that happened yesterday, which led to the special voting process being delayed in the morning as ISC officials were unable to reach the various homesteads due to community protests, as well as difficulties with access. As you know, that the city of Durban and parts of KwaZulu-Natal suffered severe floods in the last coming weeks. But today, the situation much better from the IEC. Work started off as early as 9 a.m. this morning, and they have been able to make up the lost time from yesterday. Around midday today, over 54,000 people had cast their votes, majority of them through the home visit. So the IEC was confident that they were going to be able to reach very close, if not all, those people that had applied for the special vote. So they're quite happy that the 2 days have gone well.
Okay, so that's the special votes. I want to talk about the security concerns. As I mentioned earlier, on certain hotspot areas have been identified. There were protests that delayed some of those special votes as well. Take us through that.
Yes, certainly security is a big concern here in the province of KwaZulu-Natal, as you know that it is a province that has been identified as one of the hotspots, and so there has been quite a huge deployment of police officers in various areas, and we're seeing now that more areas have been added to that list. That's a result of the protest, but we've also had incidents of shootings, we've also had incidents of intimidation and threats on IEC officials, and therefore those areas are now seen as a high-risk area, and additional police have then been deployed. We also hear from security agencies that we have the South African National Defence Force that is also on standby to assist, but from the police's point, saying that they have enough resources on the ground. Of course, they're also assisted by the reservists who will will also be beefing up the security here in the province of KwaZulu-Natal. But tomorrow, Tsepiso, I can say that the concern is around security, and that is something that from the morning, the police officers are going to be out early in the morning. That is going to be one of the issues that we're going to be looking out for tomorrow morning.
So just to get a sense of what it is that people are displeased about, areas such as Zululand District, Abequlusi and Edombe have been identified, including Alfred Duma municipalities. What are people's main gripe? Is it service delivery issues, or are they unhappy about something else?
Most of the protests at BISO have been service delivery related issues, from water to housing to road infrastructure, and communities are saying that these are not new issues. These have been concerns. They've had protests in different areas. They've had protest marches. They've handed over grievances. They've been promised by the municipalities. They've been promised by the provincial government that they were going to get services, and they saying that it's come to a point now that this is the only way to get the attention of the authorities, hoping that if they protest now, and with the threat, of course, of elections, that they're going to get that attention that the government is going to deliver. So many of the issues that they raised centered around service delivery issues. Many of these communities, as I was saying these are not issues that have just come out now. It's been for many years that they have been complaining about housing, etc.
And a quick and final question. Are people going out to vote in their numbers tomorrow? And what about the threats of IEC officials going on strike? Is that emanating from KZN as well?
Certainly, it will just depend on the area where you are, Tsepiso, and the grievances or concerns from the community. In some areas, yes, people are very eager and gearing up and ready to go out and cast their votes tomorrow. Others will tell you that they will not. They have chosen to abstain tomorrow, saying that they're not happy with the current conditions and they see no reason for them to go out and vote. So it really just depends on the different communities where we are. But in terms of the IEC, there's no issues that have come up with IEC officials. All the officials are where they should be. The IEC says it's trained the officials, they are ready. There's been no grievances from IEC staff, and so that they are saying that they are ready for tomorrow.
And of course, we'll hear more from Ayanda Mhlongo and other of our reporters across the country. But remaining in KwaZulu-Natal, the security situation, police are investigating alleged death threats against IEC officials who've been warned not to open some voting stations in the province tomorrow. This was announced by the Justice, Crime Prevention and Security Cluster during a media briefing in Durban. Affected voting stations are in 3 municipalities.
On the eve of South Africa's most highly contested poll, IEC staff are reportedly receiving death threats. It's believed the threats have been made through phone calls and text messages. They are allegedly instructing the IEC officials not to open voting stations or be killed.
We have received a report that the IEC staff have been threatened in Alfred Duma municipality, Umkanyagude and Zululand. We must work towards ensuring that IEC staff are protected and safe to do their work of delivering credible elections.
Kaunda has promised that security will be posted at all 4,884 voting stations in the province to ensure the safety of the 5.5 million registered voters.
The majority of the personnel deployed are members of the South African Police Services who have been deployed to all voting stations in the province. Other specialized teams will be placed on standby to assist with the reinforcements if any need arises.
The police have also received information that truck drivers plan to blockade the N2 and the N3. They've warned that they will act against anyone who broke the law and prevent citizens from voting. Londi Khateb, SABC News, Durban.
A National Police Commissioner Kehla Sitole visited Mahikeng in the Northwest Province for a final check of police readiness ahead of the general election tomorrow.
His day started at a parade in Mahikeng before proceeding to one of the hotspots in that area.
83 areas in the northwest have been identified as hotspots in the province. Villages around Mahikeng, Kraipan and Khanyesa have been hard hit by protests, with residents burning down vehicles and government buildings and blockading roads. While in Limpopo, robbers stole election material from a voting station. However, Commissioner Sithole says he has deployed 51,000 police officers around the country to ensure safety and security during elections. The commissioner visited one voting station in the troubled Itakom village and laid down the law.
The actual instruction, which I think we have corrected now, is that they must be here permanently, together with the IEC, because the voting station may be attacked, especially when you have the ballot boxes now closed. They may also make attempts to try and maybe steal the ballot boxes or rob them.
Northwest Provincial Elections head Tumelo Ntletiba says they are ready for the voters tomorrow.
Police officers are there to escort our security materials, particularly our ballot papers, but they should not be seen as looking out for danger, because we do not expect any danger whatsoever.
I am Tshepiso Victor Motlogelwa, SABC in Mahikeng.
Now, the National Police Commissioner, Kehla Sithole, has been crisscrossing the country, trying to check on the state of readiness for tomorrow's general election. And I think a lot of concerns have been raised about some of the areas that have been considered as hotspots in Kwazulu-Natal, as well as the Northwest. You'd recall that the National Police Commissioner had also visited Vuwani, which in the previous election as well, the local government elections, was also a hotspot. The Northwest he also been to. We understand tonight that he's also going to be in Witbank, so he'll be crisscrossing the country trying to ensure that many of the areas where there would be possibilities of violence that might take place ahead of tomorrow's election, all of that will be sorted out. And according to police at this stage, police have been deployed to many of those areas that have been considered as hotspots, of course, KwaZulu-Natal and Northwest as well. Let's join now the National Police Commissioner, Kehla Sithole. He joins us on the line from Witbank. A very good evening to you, General. Thanks for your time. I understand that you've already arrived in Witbank this evening, but of course, on the eve of the elections, can you assure South Africans that the polls will go ahead without incident?
Yes, thank you very much, and good evening. I think, yes, we do have our safer election plan that we have designed and started executing. And in terms of that particular plan, we've deployed a total contingency of 51,000 members to protect the voting stations. Over and above the 51,000 members, we have also further deployed another 30,000 for interventions to complement the 30,000, that is the 5,000.
General, of course there are areas of concern. I just spoke to a colleague of mine a few moments ago who was in Viljoenskroon, where there's unrest there that led to the torching of some of the facilities that were meant to be used in tomorrow's big day vote. Has there been enough police deployed to these particular areas? I know you've spoken widespread about how many police are deployed, but there are areas now that seem to be problematic for the Independent Electoral Commission and yourselves.
Okay, let me start by saying, yes, the different polling stations, they are not of the same category of risk. We've got the medium and the high risk. And the deployments, if there's any challenges between ourselves and IEC, we've got good cooperation, we've got good understanding, and we also have got an integrated approach. Up to this far, our deployments are across the areas. Any specific area, I've also visited an area myself in the Northwest, because I was in the Northwest today.
Yes.
And on my arrival, I just look at all the security measures, and I called more police to come in so that we create the safety of that particular polling station. So at the present moment, we do not experience that is serious problems with the safety or the deployment across. All senior officers have been deployed to look after this in case there's any.
Yes.
Yes.
General, we're looking at this stage, I know that some arrests were made in the Northwest. Can you give us a total number of arrests that have been made so far in these incidents ahead of tomorrow's election?
Just repeat that.
We know that you'd visited several areas around the country. I know in the Northwest some arrests have already been made pertaining to some of the unrest that we have seen. Are you able to give us a total figure of how many people have been arrested now in terms of the incidents that we've seen?
But what I can tell, because I cannot give you the whole report, but in the Northwest, and then there are those who attacked the IEC members, then 16 has been arrested. And then in Limpopo, there's also been an incident where 2 arrests has been effected, that is already. And from the Northwest, the arrest has been increased from 16 to 21. And then the other types of arrests are arrests that talks to opportunistic crimes. Like, for instance, yesterday there's been a heist. And this heist was there to exploit the period of the elections, and 4 people have been arrested there with the whole heist was foiled down, and then with money recovered. So other form of arrest, just incidents, but up to this far, these are the main incidents where we've effected the arrest.
All right. I know you're still tallying the numbers there, General, but also you're also probing threats against IEC officials in Kwazulu-Natal. Talk us through what exactly happened there, and are there concerns from the police at this stage that in some of those areas where those threats have been made, perhaps the IEC might not be able to do its job tomorrow?
No, up to this far, all efforts and all measures have been put in place for the IEC to be functional tomorrow. Remember, we also have contingent plans that has been put in place, especially mainly KZN and as well as the Northwest, but in all 9 provinces. And we also have trained these members in the IEC to assist and support them in case there's a problem. But also the defense has got a contingency of such people trained. But the threat assessment has been commissioned by myself to say, let us conduct the threat assessment across that is the country to the members of the IEC so that we make sure that they are properly secured, and as and when they go to areas that could be dangerous areas, they are with the police.
All right. Thank you very much for your time this evening. I know you're quite busy. That was the National Police Commissioner, General Kehla Sithole, who is now in Witbank this evening. He's been crisscrossing the country ahead, of course, of tomorrow's election, ensuring that all resources are in place so that the millions of South Africans who are expected to go out and vote do so in a conducive environment. Let's take a short break here on The Full View. We'll have more news when we get back.
Billionaire businessman Patrice Motsepe has taken PLF leader Andile Ngxitama to court over comments he made last month. The controversial leader accused Motsepe of instigating regime change in Botswana. Ngxitama referred to the mining magnates as one of those craving Botswana diamonds. He alleged that Motsepe was receiving assistance from his sister Bridget Hadebe, wife of energy Mr. Jeff Hadebe. The South Gauteng High Court postponed the matter. Motsepe wants the court to interdict Ngxitama from making comments about him, but Ngxitama says he stands by his views.
Patrice said he wants to meet us in court on the 7th, which is today. We are here.
Yes, we are.
Our lawyers were here. You saw them. When we arrived in court, Patrice's lawyer said they are not ready. They asked for an extension until Thursday, 10 a.m. Patrice said he's bringing this matter to court on urgency. It is an urgent matter. It must be heard now. We said, let us meet in court. You see, he thought he's going to intimidate us. He thought when he says he's bringing us to court, we will fold and ask for forgiveness. We are not retracting any statement that we have made. We shall meet Patrice Motsepe in court. We are back here Thursday. We are going to defeat him in the same way that we have defeated AfriForum and we have defeated Freedom Front Plus.
So our reporter Abongile Dumako covered the appearance in court. He joins us now. Abongile, let's first start. We saw a very defiant BLF leader, Andile Mngxitama. What was the stance of his legal representation?
Good evening, Tsebi. So certainly Andile Mngxitama was adamant, saying that he's not backing down. Of course, he was working alongside with his defense team, whom he said they volunteered to come and offer services in as far as this case is concerned, saying that he's not going to allow some white monopoly capital aligned people to sort of intimidate him heading up to these elections, saying that the fact that they are in and out of courts is a sign that people want to deter them from their campaign. He even went as far as saying that they are busy canvassing and there's people trying to deter them from doing that. And of course, people are intimidated and afraid because of the fact that they know when he gets to Parliament, things will change for the better. He's even going to go beyond what the EFF has said in as far as their stance is concerned, saying that, you know what, it's about time that the land returns back to its rightful owners. And if it means they must do it by force, they will do exactly that.
He hit out at the legal representation of Patrice Motsepe and the mining magnate himself, saying that he went to court seeking an urgent interdict, but yet they came up or appeared not ready.
Certainly, he says that it's quite an embarrassment from their side. He says because of the fact that Patrice Motsepe was saying that this is an urgent matter, and the next thing his lawyers asked for a postponement, which of course has been allowed until Thursday next week, saying that even by Thursday they'll be up and ready. They won't move back. Patrice Motsepe will find them in numbers in court, actually to actually send that message that says that they're not going to retract the statement, or they're not going to stop making these comments that they are making about the fact that Bridget Khadebe, who's the wife of Energy Minister Jeff Khadebe, who's a sister to Patrice Motsepe, that they want to have interest in the mining sector there by Botswana.
What is Motsepe's legal counsel saying about why they want the BLF and Mngxitama interdicted?
Basically, when we try to approach them in court to speak to them, they actually were reluctant to speak to us, saying that they are still doing some preparation in as far as paperwork is concerned. But on Thursday, when they come back to court, they'll be in a position to give a complete view of what they expect from Mngxitama, and beyond the fact that they want him to stop making these comments. And of course, Andile Mngxitama has already signaled to us earlier today that he's not going to move back. He's not going to stop what he says, because he knows for a fact that that's the case. Patrice Motsepe, as he owns mines in the country, he wants now to spread this greed of his, so to say, across the SADC region.
He's also saying Atsijigi on another matter, and that is the Equality Court ruling that found him guilty on the land or death remarks. He's saying they're going on appeal. How far are they in that process?
Again, speaking outside the South Gauteng High Court here today in Johannesburg, Andile Mngxitama going on to say that, you know what, if they want us to apologize for having decided that we want to have this slogan that says land or death, they will only get it as Zulu in it, which means they'll only get the apology or get to see the slogan being
retracted
from heaven. So basically he's saying that Lucy Stradom, who actually was represented by the Human Rights Commission, she's just wasting her time. They're not going to stop what they believe is theirs, which is land, and they're going to make it a point that land returns back to its rightful owners.
He seems to equate everything down to that subject of land, but obviously there's an issue of hate speech here. He's even using the South African Human Rights Commission's ruling on EFF leader Julius Malema to justify, to argue his case. What is the basis of that?
Basically, there's more or less no basis. If you look at the fact that, the Equality Court yesterday has come to this conclusion to say that, you know what, Andile Mngxitama in your pouch, retract these, comments, retract this slogan. Don't wear these T-shirts in public that have this land or death slogan. Basically saying that, as far as I understand, the court is just wasting their time if they think that he's going to back down, if they think that he's going to refrain and say, oh, I apologize. He says that he's going on, he's moving forward with what he believes believes the South Africans need, saying that even the people who always come to support him go to show that they believe in what he thinks will sort of advance, the interest of the majority of the country, which he refers to as black people.
And ultimately that comes down to the kind of support, the amount of support that he wants to draw at the polls tomorrow. Did he give any insight into how he thinks they'll perform as the BLF?
Confident Andile Mutama saying that watch the elections, the IEC Center, the Rock Center, the board there. BLF will emerge victoriously. He says that people believe in him. People believe in me because they know that when I get to Parliament, I'll cause more disruptions, all in the name of trying to make it a point that South Africans who would have voted me into Parliament and even into power, if it goes to that point, don't regret their decision, because I represent these people who I'm standing with here by this court, who have been with me through and through. As much as we're supposed to be busy campaigning, but they think that, or they felt that it's actually fit that they must come and support me. And I won't disappoint them. Come after the 8th of May.
And that's what he was saying, Andile Mutama, the BLF leader, earlier on. But let's take a look at what the weather is going to be like tomorrow on that all-important day. Everybody hoping, of course, for clear skies when they make their mark. We're going to find out shortly.
Thank you very much. Tomorrow is that big day where we're heading to the polls. Long lines, long queues that will be tomorrow all over the country. Let's look at the weather so that you can prepare your day tomorrow. Now we're expecting mostly a surface trough over Namibia, extending all the way into the southern parts of the country, and also a cold front over that southern coastline, causing that 30 to 60% chance of showers and thunder showers over that western interior. Partly cloudy condition expected over most of the country with 10 kilometers per hour, calm winds over the interior. And tomorrow we expect that cold front to be over that southeastern coastline, extending all the way into Free State, causing that 30% to 60% chance of showers and thunder showers along the southern coastline. We also have a cold front that is approaching the country from the west. 30% chance of showers expected over that interior of the northwest, extending into Free State for tomorrow. That was all the weather I have for you. Let's get back to the main desk.
When South Africans go to the polls, SABC News gives you names you can trust. Sakina, Criselda, Peter, Stephen, Tsepiso, Francis, Blaine, Leanne. South Africa votes. Live coverage starts Wednesday at 6 a.m. on SABC News.
We do not just speak. We let every voice in our nation find full expression in language and in culture. We do not just teach, we empower all people with education. We do not just bring you the news, we place you where the news is happening. We do not just entertain, we take you on journeys. We do not just broadcast sport, we create an arena for sporting heroes to inspire you. Ours is not just a job, it's a calling. To ensure that everyone in our nation is informed, educated, and entertained. We're able to do this because you do your part. SABC TV licenses. It's all made possible by you.
In a UN report, scientists say climate change is getting worse.
1/3 of our food sources for the population come out of the ocean.
We spoke to people who have been directly affected.
We have lost a lot of cattle. Gemsbokvlakte, Tosca gebied and Jakkalskop. Everywhere you will see there's animals dying.
I've lost 2 of my cattle this January.
Africa's demand for clean drinking water is rising.
Drinking water is a top priority.
The next day when the water comes back, it's dirty.
I have implemented a level 5 water restriction, effective immediately.
Environmentalists seek solution to preserve the planet.
This is a Cape Kirpa, which is also one of the endemic species that is only found within the Western Cape, so it occurs nowhere else in the world except in our water system.
we're going to take you through our Eye on Elections segment. Of course, as we track the pulse on the polls, we take you through the online heartbeat of the elections on social media every hour here on The Full View this week. Myself and social media expert Yavi Mudarai will be doing exactly that. We are also live on the SABC News app, available on the App Store as well as the Play Store. Well, today we turn our focus on the voter readiness for tomorrow, today's trends, as well as the meaning behind some of the trends and the hashtags that we're seeing pop up on the screens. Well, joining us in studio, of course, is Yavi, our social media expert.
Hello.
Now, yesterday we were a bit thrown off. It was the first day of special voter registration, and that was a bit sidelined due to the birth of the royal baby. But we're back on track today.
Yes,
with that being said, where are we in terms of voter readiness online?
So it seems as though people have suddenly realized that we are voting tomorrow. And I know that sounds strange because from a media perspective, that's always been covered in the last couple of days. However, you will find that in terms of the Google searches top question, in terms of what people are searching for, is whether it's a public holiday tomorrow. So that gives you an indication of exactly what is on people's minds. Some of the other things that people are talking about is very much around where are people voting, can they still vote if they haven't registered in the last registration, but they have voted before? So that kind of question. And then obviously we've had a whole lot of searches in terms of what, well, we've had a lot of searches. So let's look at this one. This one's a very interesting slide. If you look at it, so this is the top provinces and cities that are most interested in the elections, meaning that the most searches about the elections come from these cities. Durban North as a city.
Quite interesting, that one, right?
Very interesting, yeah. Especially considering that KZN as a province is only ranked 7th
on the list.
After that. So this is the slide I was talking about, is election day a public holiday? That was the question that most South Africans had on their minds. What they want to do with that information, who knows? But that was the top question of the day. The worrying one for me...
That stands out, yeah, is that we were talking about it just off air. Number 13, what is a democracy?
Yes.
25 years into a democracy, we still have that on the list as to people searching what essentially is that?
So this tells us a couple of things. If you look at some of the other questions, when was the last election in South Africa? This is telling us that voter education on what we assume are simple things then needs to be spelt out.
Yeah.
So we are talking about, you know, all the different things about voting, but simple things. How many parties are contesting for the 2019 elections? These are simple questions that obviously need to be answered, which flips the coin, and then you go, well, who has told us this, that people are searching for it? Or when people search for it, what information are they getting?
And what are they looking for, also, more importantly? If we could also go to that other slide with regards to political leaders, that's also quite interesting as to why now people would be searching for political leaders around the elections. Is that possibly to find out which political leaders associated to which political party?
It's also a case of they want to see what their most recent activity has been. So they're checking to see what's happening and where exactly they are positioning themselves. The ATM party is obviously a very young person, so there's a lot of interest in him, especially from a youth perspective. So that is why he features also in the top 10. And then the top 5 are the general ones. But remember, it's also a situation where it's in line with what political parties are then being searched for. So if you look at that, that flips around a bit in terms of what political parties, and it goes in order. So it's ANC, DA, EFF in terms of the top 3. So that becomes very interesting when you start to overlay these pieces of information.
Now, just very quickly, we're going to be breaking down some of the stats as well as some of the exposure on the tweets and the hashtag. That will be coming up in our next segment on our election. So what can we expect in our 8 p.m. bulletin?
So our 8 p.m. bulletin is we're going to break down, so the hashtags you would have seen are you know, SA Decides 2019, SA Elections 2019, and then all the different political parties. So we're going to take all of those top hashtags. I vote ANC, I choose to vote EFF, one SA for all from a DA perspective, as well as the other two general ones. And we're going to break it down and show you exactly what's been happening. And as we go through the next few hours of tonight, that's going to be far more interesting.
We'll leave it there. The Eye on Elections with social media expert Yavi Mudarai. We will also be having a look at some of the polls that we had been running on SABC News. And yeah, we'll be crossing over to Griselda and Tsepiso. Very good evening to you, ladies. What essentially do you guys make of some of the information that we've seen here today?
I think one of you know, the very interesting things that I've seen, Tsepiso, Yavi, and you know, it almost seems that the finger for me today seemed to, I'm surprised it's not trending. Everyone who participated in the special vote certainly, you know, made it a point of getting their finger showed off on social media. So I think there were some that were manicured and not well manicured.
So I'm just wondering, I mean, you see a lot of sentiment in support of political parties in some of the tweets. But does it really belie how people are going to vote tomorrow?
Well, we're going to have to wait and see. We'll be bringing up those stats in our 8 p.m. bulletin.
All right. Thanks, ladies. So,
yeah. So we're going to take a short break?
Yeah.
I think let's take a short break here on The Full View. We'll have more news when we get back.
We've seen that Brent crude oil rise about 30% this year alone.
Brent crude that's going steadily firmer speaks to a global economy that's in good shape. What we don't want to see are supply interruptions or sudden spikes.
The Bank of Athens has become GrowBank. It plans to be a bank using digital and personable relations with its customers in the agricultural and food value chain space.
We're a lucky bank in that we are small. We're already working with artificial intelligence to allow us to manage our customer data.
Agriculture is a business. If we're going to take people, millions of them out of poverty, we've got to turn agriculture into a mega sector that works for everybody.
SABC News is producing more than 150 election-related programs ahead of the May 8th election. If you think our content is not in line with our editorial policy, direct your complaints in writing to complaints@sabc.co.za. Complaints on election-related broadcast content should also be lodged with ICASA's Complaints and Compliance Committee by sending an email to bmashihu@icasa.org.za or call 012-568-3233.
Well, hello again. Thank you very much for joining us here on The Full View on the eve of South Africa's much anticipated election. Let's start with some election news now. Until the electorate system has a fully brailled ballot papers, any efforts to accommodate visually impaired voters will be second best.
So that's a complaint of some of the blind people who went to the polls to cast their special vote.
Over 26 million South Africans have been registered to take part in the 2019 general elections.
Rulani Baloyi is a popular SABC journalist. She too cast her ballot on the special voting day. Not only because she will be working like all other journalists in the country on Wednesday, but because she is also visually impaired. She says she was underwhelmed by the limited provisions made by the IEC to accommodate her.
I'm still hoping that in my lifetime in the SA electoral system we'll have properly core-brailled ballot papers. I mean, I would imagine one day I will have my own free vote where nobody else knows how I voted. I'll be able to vote like you, where I don't have to rely or trust in one other person to know how I voted.
While some measures have been put in place to assist the blind, it's still a long way off from satisfying their needs.
When I get there, they gave me papers which I thought, I don't know what they were trying to do, but it was not easy for me as a blind person to use. But I think all they have to do is to speak to the National Council for the Blind and to the Blind Workers Organization and say, how do we help us to properly braille this so people can be able to know where they are marking?
But the IEC says they've, however, put in provisions to accommodate blind voters.
For anybody who uses braille, every voting station has been equipped with what we call the universal ballot template, which is a cardboard facility that has braille on it, and we have 10 of them, one for the national ballot paper and then 9 for each of the different provinces. Those were, as I say, all voting stations have been trained and equipped to use those, and anybody asking for that assistance had a right to receive it. We haven't heard specific concerns and complaints in that regard, and we hope that none arise.
While Baloyi's visual impairment does not stop her from doing anything she puts her mind to.
At over 22,900 polling stations countrywide, Rulani Baloyi.
Many like Rulani feel the IEC is not fully accommodating, and as a result, their vote will never be secret. Nozintombi Mia, SABC News, Johannesburg.
SABC News has described as tough bringing election coverage to South Africans with limited resources. Group Executive of News, Patiswa Makopeni, says the news department has had to come up with solutions to ensure thorough coverage despite financial constraints. The SABC is facing serious financial challenges and have seen the public broadcaster knocking on government's doors seeking assistance.
Communications Minister Stella Ndabeni-Abrams says the new SABC board has been deliberating to make sure that the turnaround strategy that is required from the National Treasury is approved. In a statement, the National Treasury says it's still going through internal processes in considering a guarantee application for the SABC. The Treasury says they've been engaging with the SABC, the banks and the Department of Communications in order to come up with a suitable solution.
SABC currently is facing a financial crisis, which is why, together with the Treasury Minister, Tito Mbeweni, we have sat with the executives of SABC, we have sat with the banks that must come on board to assist them as interim, which is a sum of about 3.2 billion.
Media Monitoring Africa says the lack of adequate funding for the SABC is a fundamental threat to the democratic system. The organization says the fact that government has known about the SABC's dire financial situation for over a year and is yet to act on it is a disregard for the importance of the public broadcaster.
The delay can only be political. You can't say government doesn't have money. They've got money when these other entities who are you know, Danel gets bailouts left, right and centre, and I'm talking bailouts. The SAA gets bailouts left, right and centre every other day of the week when they say they're going to lose these things. Yet the public broadcaster, the single most important resource for information, where they've known for over a year, and they're not asking for a bailout but a guarantee for them not to get it despite repeated requests.
Media Monitoring Africa says despite the dire financial problems at the public broadcaster, the election coverage has been free and fair. They say this shows the SABC takes its role of reporting independently more seriously.
We had to think about how we navigate our coverage despite the fact that we have constraints in terms of resources. So part of our thinking was informed by the fact that we had taken a citizen-centered approach and focusing more on issues that affect them. So in the way we did things, just think about the setup here. We had to think about the fact that there are things we can't do that we used to do in the past. For instance, the radio stations that we have here are 14, and it's only current affairs programming, which is long-form content, than having news being read from here and headlines being read from here.
The SABC executive is expected to meet with the different banks this week in a bid to secure the much-needed funding. Joras Fakomosi, SABC News, Johannesburg.
Now, international observers who are in the country have commended South Africa on how parties and citizens have conducted themselves during the campaigning period. The observers have been accredited to oversee the national election tomorrow.
These election observers come from different countries. They are here to be the eyes and the ears of the international community.
Normally, when you are some 3 days before elections in Zimbabwe, the situation is so tense. It's so tense. When I was told we were going for a rally somewhere in Soweto, I said, my God, are we going to be safe? Because our understanding back home is that Soweto is one of the areas that is a violent prone area. So I thought maybe I was going to witness what we normally do in Zimbabwe. Some few days before the elections, we are always at each other's throat. There is that no freedom of association. People are not allowed to really go freely, do their campaign. But what I witnessed here, I said, is this Africa? Is this South Africa that I know? Or I'm in Europe. It was so free. You could see somebody putting on a DA t-shirt, somebody putting on a ANC t-shirt, the EFF t-shirt, going around their business without even intimidating to each other.
Myanmar is also represented, and this observer believes there is something her country can learn from South Africa.
We are a very young democracy country, and we are going to have the third general election in 2020. So we have everything to learn from South Africa, and the way that the parties campaign, the way the election commission organize the election, and then the way they invite the international election observer and all that. All these we can learn from South Africa.
India is also currently awaiting election results.
Another part is the role that social media, fake news, and really misappropriation of the media space, the impact that has on communities and people. Certainly in South Asia, you've seen a very cynical ways of manipulating social media, and that has had very unfortunate effects, violence, etc.
During the 2017 elections in Kenya, the country was on the brink of conflict. The African Union mission was led by former President of South Africa, Thabo Mbeki, came under fire from the country's opposition. But today, they are singing a different tune.
There were more experiences we had not had. But right now, we have had the experience, and hence that's the way forward, and that's the way we have maintained our country peacefully. Personally, I would give an apology, because we ought to have taken that realization at the time of his approach. There would have been no more bloodshed. But because we ignored it and we thought we were on the right track, we went astray.
The observers will be deployed to different polling stations during voting. SADC has indicated that it will issue a preliminary report by Friday. Sophie Mkwen, SABC News, Johannesburg.
Well, so as you know, for the next couple of days, of course, we will be crossing to the Rock in Pretoria. And Stephen Curtis is there for us tonight. Tepi, so we're going to take a short break and then?
Okay, so then we'll be, when we come back after 8, looking at social media, more on social media. And of course, we're going to look at predictions. We've seen it posters in the formal scene. Then we're taking it to predictions of an astrological and spiritual kind. That's after the break.
Just a quick hint there. We're going to throw the bones. Stay tuned after 8 o'clock.
We're explorers. We always have been. Endlessly curious. Always looking for answers. For new frontiers. For new stories. Because that is who we are. From script to screen. From yelling action to taking you on a journey. Radio producers. Script writers. On-air presenters. News reporters. Sports analysts. We spend late nights creating captivating storylines and earlier mornings keeping you informed, educated, and entertained. For us, it's not a job, It's a calling. We do this and more because you do your part. SABC TV licenses, made possible by you.
Clientele funeral plans.
It's your final gift of love.
I chose the clientele funeral plan because it's affordable and suits my budget.
I chose clientele because they are an original. They've been around for a long time, and I know within my family are in good hands.
I'm a farmer, and I'm a businessman, and I know a good deal when I see one. Clientele is a good deal.
Clientele is the name I trust.
SMS plan to 31043 and we'll call you back.
Solani Mkiva says that they believe that the king should be released and that they are not being opportunistic.
The last 4 years, we have been engaging with government. It cannot be a post-colonial government that begins to jail a king in a context of what actually happened.
Bobby Solomons, he's the spokesperson of the Alex Shutdown Committee, the multi-billion rand Alexander Renewal Project. Nothing came of that.
Community wants to know what really happened to the monies.
The creative director of the label, Mansu, that of course means black is beautiful in Sesotho. What has been your experience in that regard, given some of the more established labels that you have managed to work with?
It is hard. 15 years is a long time. There's a lot of sacrifice for your family to make for you.
This is the thing.
Wearing without the brief.
This is it this morning.
Hello and welcome to The Full View. I'm Tepiso Makwetla. Thank you so much for joining us.
And I'm Criselda Lewis. Thank you very much for joining us. If you've been with us, thanks for staying with us. In just a short while, we'll be crossing to Stephen Grootes, who is in Pretoria at the Operations Centre. He'll be speaking to quite a number of guests there. Of course, all in anticipation for the big day tomorrow. Millions of South Africans going out to vote.
So we're talking over 22,000 polling stations. We're talking about 26.7 million voters. And I wonder if you could share with us, wherever you are in the country, right about what time you think you'll be going out to vote. The IEC has a record of popular voting times, and it seems that 7 to 9, 9 to 11 seems to be a very popular time. And then it picks up again from 3 to 5 and 5 to 7. So I wonder wherever you are.
What time will you be there?
So the earlier we do it, the better for you and I, because we'll be here for a great deal of the day.
That's right. I plan to be up at 6 o'clock.
And voting at 7 and here at 8.
That's right. But first, of course, let's start with the top stories of the evening. Good evening to you once again. President Cyril Ramaphosa has urged all South Africans to exercise their democratic right and vote in tomorrow's elections.
Ramaphosa says many people sacrificed everything they had during the apartheid era to secure the right of all South Africans to vote. Polling stations open nationwide at 7 in the morning tomorrow and will close at 9.
That's right. The president says people must make use of this opportunity.
Fellow South Africans, it is 25 years since we all won the right to vote, when South Africans of all races, from different backgrounds, in every part of the country cast their ballots in our first democratic election. With our votes, we ushered in a new era of peace, democracy, and unity that has endured and flourished over the past 25 years. On Wednesday, the 8th of May, all South Africans will once again have an opportunity to decide their own destiny. The day has been declared a public holiday so as to allow all registered voters to go and vote for the party of their choice in national and provincial elections. In doing so, together we will be exercising the right that was won through decades of struggle and sacrifice. We will also be exercising a responsibility that we have to future generations to build a country that is at peace, that is united, democratic, fair, and prosperous. I'm therefore calling on all South Africans to go out and vote on Wednesday, the 8th of May. Voting stations will open at 7 a.m. and close at night at 9 p.m. Please remember to take your green ID book or your smart card ID or a valid temporary ID certificate to the voting station. Remember to vote twice, once for national government and the other for provincial government. We wish all parties well in this election and ask every candidate and every party agent to help ensure a free, fair, and peaceful election. Let us all go and vote for a better tomorrow. Let us vote for a brighter future. Let us go to the polls on the 8th of May and together determine our country's future. I thank you.
The IEC says at least 2 police officers will be deployed to each polling station around the country tomorrow. The deployment of police will vary depending on the volatility of the different areas. The Electoral Commission briefed the media on its state of readiness this afternoon.
There were some challenges encountered yesterday and in the early part of this morning. The Electoral Commission is encouraged to note that a significant decline in community protests this week. In those instances where protest action did continue, the South African police services were quick to intervene to restore calm. A minimum number of 2 police officers will be deployed to each voting station, and the SAPS will remain on high alert in high-risk areas to ensure no disruptions to the elections.
So the nerve center of the IEC, the Results Operations Center, of course, there's the national one that you saw in Pretoria, and there'll be 9 others at the provincial offices of the IEC.
And we'll be crossing to quite a number of our reporters who are stationed at those provincial centres as well. We'll be hearing from them, and of course crossing to all our reporters that will be on the ground as well tomorrow. Urban areas, rural areas, certainly SABC News has got you covered. But where we've got you covered now is in Pretoria, and Stephen Grootes is standing by with a number of guests that he will be speaking to, of course, on the eve of this all-important election. Stephen, it's over to you.
Griselda, thank you very much indeed. Tapiso, good evening to you, and good evening to you indeed. Thank you very much indeed for watching. I suppose you could say from the National Results Centre, this might be the last pre-election debate that you get to watch. 11 hours and what, 52 minutes from now, you'll get the chance to go out and have your say, to get some ink on your thumb if you need it, and to go and vote in elections 2019. So welcome to this discussion. We've got a great panel lined up for you tonight. Angelo Fick is a researcher. He's the head of the Alwell Socio-Economic Research Institute. Professor Lesiba Tefo, is a professor at UNISA. And in our Cape Town studios tonight, Asanda Ngwaheng is a political analyst based there in the Western Cape. And we'll actually go to Asanda first and start there for our discussion. Asanda, good evening to you. Let me start with this question, because otherwise it might get missed. But just before the voting starts, our politics, South African politics, it's very personal. It can be very polarizing. It can be full of insults, people shout and scream at each other, and yet it's surely important to remember that in this election, as far as I can tell, there's been virtually no political violence of any description.
Yeah, I think it's been a very interesting election in the sense that there hasn't been as much violence as we sometimes normally see. I think that it's a sign of the political maturation the South African system. And I think also if you look at the fact that you've got about 47 political parties that have joined the ballot, we're seeing a lot more representation, and we're seeing a lot more smaller parties and a lot more sort of independent candidates who are representing themselves under smaller parties. So it could be that people are feeling a little bit more represented than was the case before, when it usually was a three-man race between the ANC, the DA, the EFF, and the other sort of smaller parties.
Angela, I mean, do you see any of that fraying? I mean, do you think that political tolerance is perhaps getting weaker rather than stronger? We've had no political violence this time around, but the rhetoric has certainly been ramped up from 5, even 3 years ago.
So I think that the political violence that we've seen in places like Kwazulu-Natal has been intra-party rather than inter-party. So they're not between parties, but there is certainly, for people who live in some communities, forms of violence that have been very, very real. And I think part of it has to do also with the shift away from a focus of inter-party contestation in some places, and the divisions inside parties, or inside the governing party and the majority party, has taken a certain kind of precedence over some of those divisions. And in some other cases, while there haven't been personal violence, there has certainly been violence against infrastructure. And so communities have, reacted because their protests over the last 15 years have not been paid attention to, and some people experience that as a violation because it's an interruption of their lives.
So you're suggesting that when I say there are very few incidents of political violence, I actually need to be very careful with the definition that I use.
To think about what we mean by political violence. We don't have the kind that we had in the Natal Midlands in the mid-1990s, but we certainly have forms, and there are people who have died over the last 2 years, and we can't assume that simply because it isn't happening today, it isn't related to the electoral process that we're currently undergoing.
Professor Lesiba Tefo, how do you see it? Is there, are there ways of trying to resolve the issues that Angelo is talking about? Do we need to go on another sort of tolerance campaign or a social cohesion campaign? I know that phrase is perhaps overly used. How do you see it?
I think let's credit the leadership for the role they've played in this instance. You would recall even 2-3 weeks ago, 3-4 days ago, the leader of the EFF kept on saying that those who want to fight, fight. But we are not for violence, and let them show each other if they please. But let's just conduct a dignified campaign. There was an attempt at engineering some conflict in Alexander, and it backfired. And I think it was good, because those who engineered that quickly retreated, realizing that this may be counterproductive. And we know who the engineers were then. And on that basis, I'm sure it was good, it was fairly early, it was contained, and they retreated, made an introspection, and realized a different strategy is necessary. Well, some people might argue it's too early already to at least pound our chest, but I think so far so good.
So would you suggest then that there's a political cost to actually engaging in behavior that could lead to some kind of violence down the line? If your language gets too strong, I mean, even Julius Malema has, for example, really gone against the anti-xenophobia sort of dynamic. I mean, quite strongly. Do you think that's because there's actually a cost to a politician if you go too far? You'll get punished by voters. They don't like it.
Oh, yes, especially those who are politically literate. They tend to think that this type of society envisaged by the founding fathers, undergirded by the values of nation building, social cohesion and reconciliation. Anybody who wants to undermine that is very likely to get a political cost. And they are learning and they are growing, and the racist discourse also, it has been watered down in the past 6 months, because people begin to realize it is no longer carrying some currency. People no longer buy into it. You are more likely to be condemned if you use that, at least fortuitously.
Sandra, if we could go to you in Cape Town for a moment. I mean, one of the things that elections can do in many other countries, we've seen this, is that they can divide societies. Do you think that this election has really divided our society? You know, what classically happens is a politician, to try and shore up their base, to get their voters out, will attack the supporters of another party, and they do it through all sorts of code. Do you think that there's a danger that that's happened in this election, that we may be more divided the night, 11 and a half hours before we vote, than we were, say, in January?
Well, I think that, I mean, elections, as in any country, they basically have, as you've said, they have the potential to divide. But I think that South Africa is already a volatile country that hasn't dealt with the fact that it's post-conflict, that hasn't dealt with the fact that, you know, a lot of the history's past hasn't been dealt with properly. So we still have inequality, we still have racial division, and we still have economic sort of freedom or economic wealth in this country is still held by a particular race group. And so all of those things which we deal with on a day-to-day basis and don't necessarily take up arms about or necessarily protest about, they surface a lot more during elections, because people and communities are aware that during elections politicians listen more, the media pays a little bit more attention than they normally would. And that's why we see that around elections there's usually a lot more engagement around issues that we deal with or seem to tolerate on a daily basis. So I don't think it's necessarily that these issues rise up or become worse around this time, but I think that because of the attention that we pay as a media and the attention that we pay as communities to these issues a lot more during the elections, you then see a lot of, you know, racially divisive talk, and you see a lot of, you know, violent talk around different political parties.
I suppose the son of the question then is, there's all of that attention on the divides, racialized inequality really. Does it actually lead to any action? I mean, we have a lot of people talking about it during an election. Does it lead to action afterwards, do you think, necessarily?
I mean, I think it depends on it depends on what the issue is, and it depends on what the mood is. So, for example, we know that ever since 2014, there's been a lot of talk around land, and because there's been a lot of talk around land, political parties have thought through their strategies and their promises around land a lot more. You're seeing a lot more communities actively engaging in land struggles. You're seeing organizations like Reclaim the City talking about the urban landlessness issue, the urban homelessness issue. And so it really depends on what the mood of the nation is, and politicians are really very good, and political parties in general are really good at sort of following the mood of where the people are. And so there will be issues that do get given a lot more attention than they would have if the election hadn't happened, and there will be issues that, you know, as we know, they'll fall by the wayside. But I do think that one of the things that we're going to see a lot more action, or we're going to have to see a lot more action, otherwise communities are going to respond quite violently and quite aggressively on, is land, and in particular urban land. That's why we're seeing a lot more protests, we're seeing a lot more land grabs. I mean, I was in Hart Bay just the other day, and there's land grabs already happening there in various parts of the area, because people are not being given land on which to build their houses, and so they are just basically, you know, taking the law into their own hands and doing what they see fit.
Angela, I mean, there's another dynamic that maybe is sort of adding to the dynamic brought up by Professor Tefo a few moments ago, that, I mean, in terms of keeping political parties, I'll use this quote in inverted commas, you know, on the straight and narrow in terms of divisive rhetoric, which is that they might all have to do business with each other afterwards. Once the campaigning stops, the counting begins, there might be a little bit of jostling for coalitions. Do you think that works at all, or do you think that actually you have a classic political situation where political parties attack each other, and then what is said on the campaign stays on the campaign? I think Musi Memani put it quite like that one.
So there is an element of that, but I think we've also grown so used to the 8 years of the Zuma administration of the African National Congress that Jacob Zuma's rhetoric had become the air we breathed. And whatever criticisms I have of Cyril Ramaphosa and his leadership of the African National Congress, he certainly hadn't engaged with opposition members in the same way. So what people saw as his conciliatory gestures in Parliament when he first started making those speeches were actually far more sophisticated forms of politicking, of neutralizing opposition parties by a certain kind of rhetoric that wasn't about pointing out enemies. And I think that that has filtered through the ether to a certain extent, because if you don't have publicly prominent figures engaging on an almost everyday basis in vilifying political opposition, it changes the mood in which political contestation happens. And because for almost a decade that is what we had in this country on a near daily basis, partly because media organizations pay attention to the spectacles, not to the everyday, what you have now is a kind of, wait, why is everyone getting along? Because it is such a, almost, one hates to say the word, refreshing change from what we had had for 10 years.
Professor, you're shaking your head, you're nodding your head, I should say, quite vigorously. Leadership matters.
Oh yes, it does indeed. Look, the question of, you know, no permanent friends, no permanent enemies I have no doubt they're going to kiss and make up. If you listen to the rhetoric of the two potential coalition partners, Maimane and Malema. Malema has been less vulgar, less robust, and just almost opening himself up for engagement. But you can pick up what he said, I think, might have had a political cost for him, that we are prepared and ready to communicate with the ANC. And in the past 2 weeks, I could sense that there is he's retreating from that, and possibly because he might have been advised that maybe let's talk coalition later. And the likelihood is strange bedfellows will go together once more.
Okay, that's the sort of mood of the nation tonight is what we have just over 11 and a half hours before voting starts. Let's look at some of the, what's the fancy word, prognostications, I suppose, predictions, the polling that we've seen. I mean, Asanda, if we can go to you in Cape Town for a moment, I mean, we look at, we've had various polls. Some of the polls are wildly different. I mean, they're so wildly different, I almost, for their own sakes, don't want to put their names to them tonight. Should we just throw the whole lot out and say, let's wait for the election, or should we actually take the polls seriously?
So can you repeat that?
Do you think we should take the polls that we've seen seriously, or do you think we should throw the whole lot out?
Well, I mean, I think the polls can be sort of instructive in terms of getting us to talk about what the mood in the country is, and I think they can sort of give some sort of clues in terms of how people are going to vote. But I have serious issues with how some of the polling is done in terms of the sample size that gets that gets taken, and also the fact that a lot of the sort of criteria that gets used for these polls becomes highly problematic for me, because although we know that South Africa votes on a racially based way, we do know that, you know, a black South African is not a black South African is not a black South African, in the sense that black people have got different ideologies, and even those who vote for the ANC, for example, to vote for different kinds of reasons. And so when you are polling people on the basis of their race, sometimes you will miss a lot of those ideological differences, especially if you focus only on whether they're voting for a particular party or not. I feel that you know, it would be better if the polls focused a lot more on ideology and how ideology drives people, and focus a lot more on issues and how the issues that people care about influence the way that they vote, rather than trying to do a sort of polling race, horse race type of situation where they like, the ANC is going to win, the ANC is not going to win. And I mean, I think it's pretty clear if you read and if you talk and you engage people, that the ANC and the DA are actually in quite a lot of trouble in terms of the ways in which the voters feel about them, both as incumbents in the Western Cape and in the Greater South Africa.
Angelo, Vic, how much weight do you give the political polls? Should we look at Twitter and talk radio? I always find talk radio for some reason very reliable.
Look, I draw a distinction between social science and market research. And for too long in South Africa, we continue to conflate the one for the other. There are all sorts of concerns around methods of gathering this information, the language in which it's happened, you know, the sampling technique that is used, the deductions that are made from the kinds of questions that are asked. And vigorous interrogation of social science happens on an everyday basis in our research institutions, in universities, at the Human Sciences Research Council. For some of these polling companies, I often have had the feeling in my history over the last 6 years that there hasn't been the same kind of rigorous theoretical interrogation of methodology and conceptualization. And there's often a reliance on apartheid tropes and stereotypes of population group, of, you know, stable ideas of how neighborhoods work in terms of composition. And so the kinds of things that we've seen around the Stellenbosch paper, I think pockmark other forms of research in this country. And so for me, the polls are themselves part of the social phenomenon of political engagement in South Africa. And one hates to invoke the anthropic principle, but the way in which the very existence of the poll influences human behavior in the elections is something that we at some point are going to have to start thinking about, because this information is given wide credence and wide circulation, and people do make assumptions about the validity of the information, and their behavior in relation to that information may be very much more complex than simply a reflexive one.
So are you suggesting then that we should interrogate what might be the real motivation behind releasing a poll on a certain date.
Yes, or why people want to have certain questions answered before those questions will be answered in a plebiscite. So the voting is happening tomorrow. We will know the answer to this. Why would you be so particularly interested? Because, you know, there's money to be made of giving the results out early, and there's marketing to be done in relation to certain things. And a lot of that, I think, you know, valid as it is in a certain paradigm, as a social scientist, and many of the social scientists I engage with in some respects, you know, we don't take it without pound loads of salt, because it isn't actually a mirror held up to society.
Professor Tiff, I'm going to find something that you two disagree on. You're nodding your head again in agreement.
Yes. Look, I mean, I'm glad. I really appreciate all that they say. And incidentally, I didn't do well as a Sangoma trainee, so I wouldn't venture into that area. But the question for me is, are they value-free? Or are they ideologically innocent, those who are administering these surveys? I don't want to believe that. Some of them, there is a financial motivation. Some of them, there is a political motivation. But anyway, in a small way, they do influence. But if you take surveys that had to do with Donald Trump, then you might say they don't mean much, because nobody gave him a chance, almost a zero chance. But he emerged victorious.
You know, I must tell you, I actually made a bet with myself as to which of the analysts would bring up Brexit and the polling for Donald Trump first, and congratulations. Okay, but what's interesting to me is that the political parties, they don't take those polls seriously. They do their own polling, or at least we know the two of the bigger ones do. Indeed. And they seem to react to that. I mean, we talk about the reaction of human beings. Professor, from what I understand, you know, there'll be focus groups, there'll be tailoring of messages, there'll be all of that, but they do take that polling seriously, their own polling.
Yes, they tend to take them more serious, because at least they know what they are asking, and they are mindful and concerned that if we don't take at least a cognizance of what it says, we may end up going in the wrong direction. If you listen to them, they tend to be more critical of themselves, their own surveys. They are less generous in terms of their focus. They are more cautious, more circumspect, and I think that's the route to go. But the other parties, I'm afraid, some may be motivated by external factors rather than the one that inform and influence party political actors.
That's very, very subtle. Sunda, let's just go to you for a moment on this. I mean, there's been so much, you know, discussion and I don't know what you would put it, hysteria maybe, around what the impact of this election will do to the internal dynamics of two main parties. People talk about the Democratic Alliance, but generally I think there's been a lot of conversation in the media and various places around what happens after these election results within the governing African National Congress. The sort of claim has been from lots of people, perhaps without much basis, that anything below 60% leads to huge trouble in the ANC. I mean, do you see it like that? How important do you think this election is for the ANC? And is there a magic number, or do you think people who suggest that there's a magic number haven't thought this through?
Well, I think that this is one of those elections that's going to define the future of the ANC, because we have seen ANC voting going further and further down each year. And we do know that what we have is a government that sits because a minority of a majority votes them into power. And what we may potentially see in this election is that the ANC may win with a majority, but it may have such a small majority that they may need to form a coalition government. And I think you may even see in the DA that the DA also has been declining and may find itself in a majority that also still requires, some collaboration from other political parties in order to be able to pass a lot of the laws or the policies that they may want to pass. So I think that's why a lot of people are talking about, the potential impact of this election. I think also, like, we have a situation where for the first time, both the DA and the African National Congress have had major crises and have really not, given the voter reasons to vote for them. So for example, the ANC has had, this ESCOM crisis, they've had corruption, and they've had, all the issues that we talk about on a daily basis. But you have the DA, I think for the first time, having a major government failure in terms of the water crisis, which saw, the Western Province, the Western Cape, which they always, tout as being the best run, the best planned, the best everything, nearly going into a huge crisis where the there was no water at all. And I think that that was a reality check for a lot of people, particularly people who used to vote the DA before and used to trust the DA. And a lot of dinner table talk is saying that, people are not sure if they're even going to vote for the DA this time, because between the water crisis and, the fight that they had with Patricia de Lille and all those other people who then ended up resigning, they're not sure that it's a political party that can be trusted. And so I think that it's all bets are on in terms of how are people going to vote. Are they going to vote based on their loyalties and where they used to vote before, or are they going to be persuaded by new political parties like Good? Are they going to try out new smaller political parties that didn't exist before? Because as I've said, we've got 47 new political parties, so there seems to be a wider range of choices, and I'm sure that is making the big sort of the big four a little bit more nervous than they were before, because you also have the EFF, which was doing really well and really garnering support, particularly from black youth, but once they were embroiled in the corruption scandal around VBS, a lot of people who were publicly supporting them suddenly also started to rethink them. So every single political party fighting in this election is smeared by some or other kind of controversy. So it's going to be very interesting to see how people then weigh up, the best of the best or the worst of the worst, depending on which way you want to approach it.
All right. I mean, I think there are all sorts of things to sort of tackle here. Professor, I mean, I do think we need to have a conversation about perhaps about what, the internal dynamics of the ANC after this election. I mean, do you see that the result of the election as being very important for those internal dynamics?
Yes, I do. I think so, especially for the president. I'm sorry. Because there are those who are almost waylaying him, and they would want him the performance almost to go around 50-56 so that they can point a finger at him as to whether he's still a worthy candidate to lead the organization into the next phase. It is for that reason that some people might say, yes, we need to go back and vote. But that's one. The other one relates to the point made by my colleague earlier on, the dynamics in the Western Cape. I don't put a high premium on Good or on De Lille's party. My argument is the people in the Western Cape are in a position where they can compare and contrast vis-a-vis what transpired in the past. Cumulatively speaking, I'm sure the majority of them would say, indeed, comparatively speaking, the DA has done well. Are we giving the vote to De Lille in order for her to take us back where we were? I don't think personality politics at one level, especially where people are politically literate, doesn't play a major role.
Okay. Angelo, let me put the question to you as well. I mean, all of this talk, and I mean, a lot of it is sort of headline talk, and I understand, I'm a journalist myself, I understand why politics is often reduced to personality. Sometimes it's the only way you can sort of explain policy and which policy will win. But obviously journalism can be very guilty of oversimplifying, and I put that very politely. But the question really boils down to, is the president much weaker if the ANC doesn't get 60%? Or after the polls that we've just decided we don't agree with, is 58% the new 60?
So I think there is something symbolic about the 60 number, just as there was something symbolic in the 2016 municipal elections about those particular municipalities which the ANC was kept out of power. And the 60 figure might be significant. If the number goes very low because it is machinated by people inside the ANC to do so, the risk they run is that their party is then on a permanent decline into obscurity. And that's a risk I think they're going to have to be very careful about, because it is about winning this election, but also keeping the ANC in the running for future elections. And I suspect that once you go down below 55 as the ruling or the governing party is not likely to recover, given the troubles that it faces internally, given the issues around corruption and maladministration that belabor its administrators in the various spheres of government in the next 5 years. And voters will certainly see this as the beginning of the end for that idea that there is no African National Congress without South Africa, and there is no South African governance without the African National Congress. This idea that the ANC would rule until Jesus comes back, quote unquote, would suddenly disappear if the ANC were to weaken itself into the low 50s. And we've seen that trend beginning to happen in one province, Gauteng, which then starts affecting the way in which voters behave in municipal elections. And once people see the possibility that life will continue under a different party in government, the idea that there is either the ANC or nothing stops being an issue. And what people do is they accommodate themselves to whatever the new administration is and do behave the way in which people in the Western Cape have behaved. And if you think of the people of KwaZulu-Natal in the shift from IFP to ANC governance, people have experienced this. Life goes on. It may not be better, it may be slightly worse, it may be very different. But political life is not just about which party governs the country. That's what parties like people to believe. But 60, I think, is a significant figure for Cyril Ramaphosa and the people around him who have a certain idea of the future of the ANC. There are others who have a very different idea of the future of the ANC, and that contestation will not cease at the end of these elections. They will have to continue through those mechanisms already in place, commissions of inquiry, ethics commissions, investigations inside the party, and the new public protector and the newly armed shall we say, state institutions that have to manage, priority crimes and all sorts of other forms.
And of course we have to start with the composition of a cabinet, which could be interesting. Professor?
Yes, you see, I think Ramaphosa has done well so far, but in retrospect, he might be saying to himself, had I known that what is transpiring, especially in the Zondo Commission, would happen, I certainly would have at least refrained from getting it take off until after the elections, because for me that compounds the situation. For me, there are those who voted with their feet but they remained loyal members of the ANC, hoping that in the new dawn they would go back and then vote. But the past 6 months, what is happening there, I don't think they would have sufficient courage to stand up from their seats and say, again, we are going to give the vote. And that speaks to the delicacy and the fragility of the Ramaphosa's position. It becomes more and more tenuous when you look at it vis-a-vis the internal strife. His greatest opposition is within his own party, is within the tripartite alliance. The good work done notwithstanding, there are those who are hell-bent on ensuring that he appears as a weak leader.
I suppose before we get too caught up in ANC politics, and I should have known this is where this conversation would go, Alessandra, I would like to start with you around the Democratic Alliance, because, and famously the DA used to say this all the time, that in each election it's increased its share of the vote. This is the first time when there's a very real prospect that doesn't happen. Do you think someone somewhere is sharpening a knife for the back of Mmusi Maimane if they don't get over 22% in this election?
Well, I'm sure that if you speak to a lot of the people who used to be within the DA, they'll tell you that there are a lot of knives that are being sharpened for various people within the Democratic Alliance, because we talk a lot about the ANC infighting and the internal strife, but the Democratic Alliance is having a lot of power struggles that are going on at the moment. And I mean, if you look at Mmusi Maimane's track record, he hasn't actually really delivered anything in terms of a win for the DA in any way. It's been under, the faces of various people under local government who had previous history for the most part within the DA. So I think he's definitely going to be on his way out if the DA doesn't increase their votes in any way. And I think also a lot of what happened with Patricia de Lille and a lot of what has been happening within DA power politics and some of the things that get leaked out into the media, they don't really give one confidence, and they don't really give one a sense that Mmusi Maimane is a man who's really at the helm of the DA. They give a sense of Helen Zille still engineering things from the background. They give a sense of very strong people within the city of Cape Town who are still the political players. And I think that a lot of South Africans are really not interested in putting up what one can call, a front of a political leader anymore. And if you look at the social media and if you look at the way in particular other young black people respond to Mmusi Maimane, you'll see that there's very little respect for him. So I think that one of the things that we need to think about and we need to analyze a little bit more is how much of the DA's vote is really a DA vote, and how much of it is actually a vote against the ANC and a vote out of spite than actual endorsement of the DA, because there are a lot of people that believe in democracy, and there are a lot of people that believe that opposition is a very important part of democracy, and they believe that it's better to bet on the already winning horse or on the largest or larger political opposition political party, and we may be seeing that, you know, the DA has been able to ride the wave because of that. But what we may begin to see with this election is that there's a lot of political parties, and a lot of them actually have, you know, core support on the ground, and a lot of them are based in the communities in which they have been campaigning. So it's going to be very interesting to see how that then translates, you know, in terms of the ballot and in terms of how people actually vote, whether it's going to be for the DA or against the DA, or whether the DA is actually going to get a lot of its potential votes taken away by a lot of the new smaller parties that have just joined.
And I mean, it's under the economic freedom fighters who everyone expects to grow. I think everyone sees that. I would imagine that this would embolden Julius Malema. It would strengthen his political power. It would probably increase the volume of his political voice. Certainly, it will give him a very interesting negotiating position in all sorts of ways if he gets, say, above 10–12%.
Yeah, I mean, I think the EFF, in spite of the VBS scandal, is likely to grow, and there's one reason that it's likely to grow. I mean, I always say that one of the things that the EFF is very good at is making ordinary black people seem less radical, you know, because a lot of the time they say what black people are thinking. They basically bring a lot of conversations that black people are having into the public arena, and that's why they have a lot of affiliation, and that's why a lot of people are constantly, you know, co-signing the stuff that they're saying. And that's something that's, you know, that's different to other political parties, like for instance the ANC, which tries to, you know, have a more centrist line, and the DA, which tries to have a more you know, liberal in the American sense line. And so I think that particularly with young people, for as long as the land question and the land issue is not dealt with, for as long as the issue of inequality and the racial dynamics of who holds power, who has the land, and who is ultimately able to enjoy, you know, all of the benefits of South Africa, for as long as the majority of black people continue to be poor, Julius Malema's political party is going to grow. And I don't know if that's you know, necessarily a good thing or a bad thing for the country, if you consider some of the corruption that they have been, you know, accused of, both before when they were still members of the ANC, and also now with the VBS scandal. But until we've dealt with those questions, people like Julius Malema are going to be riding on that wave and be able to get a lot of popularity.
Professor Tefo, I mean, obviously key to all of that will be whether he holds the balance of power in Gauteng. Do you think it's going to be that close in Gauteng? I mean, Julius Malema has the power to decide to anoint someone to, you know, be the premier of Gauteng. He's going to use that to the full ability.
Yeah. I think chances are we might be surprised by the outcome tomorrow that might warrant a coalition government, which will embolden Julius and them. For me, yes, they will do well, and they can do well going ahead, if only he in particular minds his caustic and polarizing language. I think he would grow taller if he would use a measured language, a more inclusive language, if he really wants to be a leader in the future. Otherwise, he might look back and say, I had potential, but I squandered that. But as far as Gauteng is concerned, yes, I think they have a chance to do that. But again, people must learn to appreciate the complexities that go with coalition governments. The one who gets the most vote must lead the coalition government with the necessary respect, but they are not equal partners. The winning democracies that I know, right, and they are at least anchored in coalition governments, Britain and Germany. You have to respect the partners, but at the same time, national interests and not party political interests should supersede all else.
Angela, I want to pick up on something that Sanda was talking about. In a way, this might be the wrong term, but a structural reason as to why the support for the EFF would grow, which is basically young, unemployed black people who, you know, 56% youth unemployment is the figure that I think is most widely touted. At the same time, usually in politics, when a radical voice comes along, to grow at some point you have to moderate a little bit, because what that means is that allows you to have newer members who maybe aren't as radical. That can be quite a difficult process. Do you think Malema's starting that process, perhaps?
I think the first thing that has happened in South Africa is the assumption that the economic freedom fighters is a radical voice. And that, I think, is a profound assumption to make in a South Africa where there are all sorts of political movements like Abahlali, like the Landless People's Movement, who would argue that any participation in a parliamentary democracy founded on the principles of this post-apartheid settlement is not at all radical, because it is a certain kind of investment in. Any kind of radical gestures from the economic freedom fighters once they got into the National Assembly about the tax-funded salaries that they were drawing and how that was going to be dispersed, that silently and quietly disappeared. Let's not forget their promises ahead of 2014. So there are all sorts of things that I think we make assumptions of, and it's partly because, as Tariq Ali points out, there has been a radical shift to the right of global political discourse, that any kind of voice that is pro-poor, any kind of voice that is about social justice and redistribution becomes a radical voice, even though in 20th century politics a lot of those voices were social democrat voices of the barely left centrist vision of democracy. And I think if we go back to the DA, I think too much is made of, and this is where I disagree with the Sunda slightly, of personality conflicts. I think there are some very specific policy conflicts that have played themselves out very spectacularly in the Democratic Alliance when their head of policy, their policy wonk, quit very publicly in an ugly letter released to the public to the leader of the party. So it's not just a matter of, Helen Zille versus Musi Maimane. There is actually a more stronger conflict between old-style, traditional, liberal ideas of what the future of South Africa should look like, and a party caught in the interregnum where that is not ever going to get you into governance of the nation. You are going to have to call upon, in the most unequal society in the world, with the greatest income inequality and the most appalling youth unemployment figures, the aspirations of 58 million people, not of 6 million people. And to do that, a liberal vision of the future isn't going to sell itself, because people have aspirations that are outside of the ability of the liberal vision to deliver. And that, I think, is a crucial fight inside the DA that is often mistaken as a kind of black-white fight. It isn't a black-white fight. It is a fight between people who want to work within the system as it is and people who are, as in the ANC, disaffected with the system. And we must not forget that the African National Congress, at least, is a party that has huge structures on the ground, which it tells us is where it gets its mandate from. Any party that has that as its mandate and is still doing polling is doing a very complicated game by reducing politics to marketing, because it's asking not just what do my supporters want me to do, it's also what of what my supporters want me to do will be saleable to a potential voting public. And the commodification of South African politics has been ongoing for a while now, that it's a choice between styles, between rhetoric, and ordinary voters tell us all the time that they vote on bread and butter matters. They vote because they believe the party is going to deliver, they vote because the party hasn't delivered, they vote because the party has delivered. We often talk about ANC failures, but there have been ANC successes, which people, when you go into places like Kwanyamanzane outside of Mobela, will tell you, I vote for this party because, and they will list things that I think many of us in middle-class South Africa would blanch at the thought that people think of 25 years of progress as being the ability and freedom to sell goods on an open market without police harassment, the ability to sit on a piece of land in the public domain and engage in business, the ability to seek jobs in cities and towns without interference. Those are measurable changes in people's lives. We had the Free State Premier earlier today, and I don't want to go on about this, but she actually measured, and for me it was a tragedy that it took her 25 years to tell us that a high school was built in a township. Or in a rural area in the Free State. When I started voting in 1994, that was not our vision as young people, that a quarter of a century later we would still be celebrating the building of a school as a spectacle. And here I go back to Ndebele and my last remark on this. We in South Africa tend to focus on the spectacle, and it's time we rediscover the ordinary. The spectacle is what the politicians are saying in all sorts of ways. The ordinary is the political life that ordinary people, 58 million people, make on the ground. And tomorrow, a substantial portion of that 58 million people, and of those, the 30 million who are eligible, will vote and will tell us what their choice is. And some of them, some of us will find that the choice is unpalatable. Some of us will think it's the wrong choice. But we live in a democracy where that is the choice we have to live with. Democracy is not doing the right thing all the time because I've decided that is. That's autocratic. The right thing might be we live in a constitutional democracy and people's democratic will is tempered by constitutional law. And so we must accept that tomorrow millions of people will tell us what their choices are, and by Friday morning we will know what that tells us.
Fundamental point there, Angela. Thank you. Sunda, I do want to touch a little bit on the smaller parties, just because I think in some ways, we know that I think some of the figures I've seen say 15 million people won't vote, aren't registered to vote, particularly among younger people. We see this in democracies where people have been voting for far longer than here as well. But do you think there are any of the smaller parties that, I'll use the word shock, I mean, you can't predict a shock by definition, but do you think that there's some parties that may be relatively new to the scene that actually we're all going to be quite surprised by come Thursday morning?
Yeah, I think that for me, some of the political parties that we're seeing are being run by various personalities who have had a lot of media airplay, and who, whether we agree with them or not, do have some following. Like, for instance, the former SABC CEO Claudio Motsoeneng and his political party might surprise us. He might just get a seat just based purely on the number of people who just have affinity to certain personalities. And I think also another one that'll be interesting to watch is the ATM, because there seems to be quite a lot of powerful people behind it who have been campaigning. I mean, they're one of the few political parties that I've seen their posters on taxis, and we know that taxis actually go around to quite a number of places, and so they've had their message spread quite far and wide. And I think that when it comes to the Western Cape, we're probably going to see potentially an increase in COSA, and I do see some potential surprises coming potentially from Patricia de Lille, even though there are some people who are suspicious of her because they believe she's a career politician. So I think we are going to see quite a number of surprises, because the general sentiment amongst people is that they're tired of the same old. They've tried the ANC and it hasn't done anything for them, and some are saying in the Western Cape they've tried the DA and it hasn't done anything for them. And I think also the DA faces the misfortune of having been the incumbent now in quite a number of municipalities, which it didn't have before. And so those people in those municipalities now have had a taste of DA leadership, which they didn't have before, and they may not necessarily like it. I mean, they may like it and that may increase their votes, but you may find that some people who previously thought maybe if the DA was in charge of this municipality, things would be better, and the pace of change maybe just didn't happen as quickly enough for them. You may find that a lot of those smaller political parties are now going to take those votes because they are going to have the luck, if you can call it, of never having had to prove themselves, whilst the three main political parties have the burden of proving themselves, particularly with the DA and the ANC, who have actually run cities and provinces, etc., and have a track record that people can go to and say, did I like that and did I not like that? So I'm expecting quite a number of small political parties to surprise us.
Professor, are you expecting, I mean, he called himself the wonderful person called Cloudy, so I'm quoting him when I say that. Are you expecting Claudio Motsoeneng to be in Parliament, the ACM?
Well, he told us yesterday that some of us are going to collapse when we see him walk into the State House on Thursday. That's how confident he is that on Thursday would be the president. I wouldn't be that generous to expect him to get 48%, I mean 48,000. To get a seat, I think at this juncture, you would need 48,000 votes. Will he command that? I'm not sure. But the one that I think is likely to surprise me, if not others, is the ATM of Manye and them. I think they've got target groups, they've got catchment areas, and ethnic extraction, if one may use that. Tribalism and ethnicity tend to influence and tend to be where people are driven to, as well as regionalism. If you look at ATM, where it is based, the victim in this case is very likely to be the ANC, because the target group of the Smallanyana group is in the main the catchment area of the ANC.
Angela, I'm slightly struck, and we have to end this in a couple of moments. We could go on until voting ends, but I'm slightly struck that when I talk about smaller parties, no one's mentioned the IFP or the UDM. I mean, parties led by leaders who a lot of this country respects, who are held in high esteem, and yet no one seems to be predicting a big increase for either of them.
Well, I think partly that is also about, as I go back to the idea of the spectacle. So there are parties that have been in Parliament for at least 20 to 25 years. And they're small, but they've been there consistently and present. And many news media organizations pay attention to the newcomers because they're spectacular. They have figures that are charismatic, that behave like prosperity pastors, and there's a sense of, visual appeal. And yet, one has to ask whether that is disrespectful to the hundreds of thousands of people who have voted for those parties that have been there for 25 years. Because not paying attention to them is, in essence, to ignore the desires of those 48 times 10 seats people who voted those people into those positions. I think the party that I think I'm likely to be shocked by increase, and that I'm constantly being told will increase, is the Freedom Front Plus. And then the party that I think we should all watch is the Congress of the People, because there have been some really internal divisions there around his role, Mr. Lekota's role, in relation to what happens with the rest of his party's members. And so whether this is his last show in Parliament or whether he even returns is a question that will be answered.
Angelo Fick, thank you very much indeed. Director of the Awa Socioeconomic Research Institute, Professor Lesiba Terfel from UNISA, and Asanda Ngoheng, a political analyst based in the Western Cape. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. All right, you've got 11 hours until you get that mark of ink on your thumb. Thanks for being with us. Good night.
Clientele funeral plans.
It's your final gift of love.
I chose a clientele funeral plan because it's affordable and suits my budget.
I chose clientele because they are an original. They've been around for a long time, and I know within my family are in good hands.
I'm a farmer, and I'm a businessman, and I know a good deal when I see one. Clientele is a good deal.
Clientele is the name I trust.
SMS plan to 31043 and we'll call you back.
The SABC News mobile app is your one-stop digital portal to all the news you need. Stay connected with the latest in breaking news. Watch the SABC News channel along with clips and live streams of all the big news events. And listen to all the SABC News radio stations live, including podcasts and much more. Simply download the SABC News app to your Android or iOS device from either the Play Store or the App Store. SABC News, independent, impartial.
This week on Trends Travel, we take you behind the scenes and also into the mud at the first ever Monster Truck Juggernaut Monster Jam Festival. We also give you a taste of authentic Indian street food straight from the streets of Kerala, India. All this and so much more. So be sure not to miss out this Saturday at 5:30 p.m.
When South Africans go to the polls, SABC News gives you names you can trust. Sakina, Criselda, Peter, Stephen, Tsepiso, Francis, Blaine, Leanne. South Africa votes. Live coverage starts Wednesday at 6 a.m. on SABC News.
Did you know the big hole digging started in 1871 and ended on the 14th August 1914? The hole produced 2,722 kgs of diamonds. However, one diamond as huge as 490 carat of stone found in the open prior 1868 gave them the interest to dig. Extracted from 22.5 million tons of soil. Today, the hole sits at a breathtaking 214 meters deep. Kimberley Big Hole attracts tourists from all over the world, taking a vintage tram past the city, then cycling around the Big Hole. The Drakensberg is the name given to the eastern portion of Great Escarpments, which encloses the central southern Africa plateau. The name means Drakensberge in Afrikaans and is called Ukahlamba in isiZulu, which means barrier of spears. The Drakensberg Escarpment stretches for over 1,000 kilometers from Eastern Cape, then forms the border between Lesotho and the Eastern Cape, and the border between Lesotho and Kwazulu-Natal. It then forms the border between KwaZulu-Natal and the Free State, and next as the border between KwaZulu-Natal and Mpumalanga. It winds north through Mpumalanga, where it includes features such as Blade River Canyon, 3 Randevals, and God's Window. The Drakensberg is the highest mountain range in the country, reaching 3,482 meters above sea level.
We've seen that Brent crude oil rise about 30% this year alone.
Brent crude that's going steadily firmer speaks to a global economy that's in good shape. What we don't want to see are supply interruptions or sudden spikes.
The Bank of Athens has become GrowBank. It plans to be a bank using digital and personable relations with its customers in the agricultural and food value chain space.
We're a lucky bank in that we are small. We're already working with artificial intelligence to allow us to manage our customer data.
Agriculture is a business. If we're going to take people, millions of them out of poverty, we've got to turn agriculture into a mega sector that works for everybody.
Well, a very good evening to you and welcome back. Of course, you're watching The Full View. I'm Criselda Lewis and
I'm Tsepiso Makwetla. Thank you so much for joining us in the headlines tonight.
Let us all go and vote for a better tomorrow. Let us vote for a brighter future. Let us go to the polls on the 8th of May and together determine our country's future.
A message from the President on the eve of the nation's 6th democratic elections.
More than 20 people arrested after a community hall and clinic are torched at Viljoenskroon in the Free State.
And in Kwazulu-Natal, police are investigating alleged death threats against IEC officials in 3 municipalities.
All right, so let's see what's happening on the social media front. South African elections 2019, driving around 17,000, was it actually 17 million tweets already, so obviously a big talking point.
Absolutely. So let's go to Shantae and Yavi. They have their finger on the pulse on what's trending, what's not trending, and who's saying what about the elections. Over to you guys.
We certainly do. As we track the pulse of the polls, we will measure the online election heartbeat on social media every hour. With me to track today's highlights is social media expert Yavi Mudirai. Very good evening to you once again, Yavi. Of course, Twitter has been a buzz. The hashtags have been going. Let's have a look at some of those hashtags that we've seen of prominence today.
So there's a whole lot of, so the 5 top hashtags that have banked the most amount of tweets and engagement is SA Elections 2019, which we all know about, SA Decides 2019, I Choose to Vote EFF, I Vote ANC, and One SA for All, which is the DA hashtag. So these 5 hashtags have dominated today's trending topics, and from a top perspective, they literally have been in that order. When we look at the engagement of all of those, SA Decides has possibly been the most engaging, the most attractive. So people And the reason for that is because it's about people. It's about me. I'm South Africa. So when you say SA elections, it's about electing parties. When you talk about ANC, EFF, DA, it's about them. So SA Decides is very much about I'm South Africa. I am deciding. So that, from an authenticity perspective, from a human element aspect, it really is moving in a particular direction. So SA Decides is possibly going to really grow. And it's literally started today. So whereas the other hashtags have had a kind of a week's traction, this has started today. So we're going to see this. I predict that by tomorrow, this will probably be like literally the top trend, maybe for the week, maybe for the month, maybe for the year.
And then we also have elections, right? We have elections as well as political parties. Let's have a look at some of the stats on that.
So SA Elections has been around for the past couple of weeks. But yeah, so if you look at it, it says long life. Long life means that it's moving towards a certain particular point, but it will head.
All right, and then we also have on some of the political parties, let's break that down very quickly. This one is One South Africa for All.
So this is the DA's hashtag that they promoted today. So you would have seen it in your trends, you would have seen it as promoted hashtag. So that means that they've put money behind it, basically. And you can see from a hashtag exposure, it was 41,000. I choose to vote EFF, so today was Tuesday. So they added the word choose into their hashtag. So it's a different one.
All right, the last one coming in here, I vote ANC.
So the one thing I want to show you is 0.6 million from an exposure perspective. So if you looked at it from the previous ones, we saw in the thousands. This is hitting 600,000. So I vote ANC is a consistent hashtag.
All right. Let's have a look at the poll. We're also running a poll here throughout the course of the morning asking specifically young voters why they had not registered. And these are some of the results that we're seeing coming up. 58% of our participants in the poll are saying that they were simply not interested. We have 10% saying that I don't have an ID, and 32%, which is also quite high, saying no party represents me at this stage.
So between those two, right, that's 90%. That is telling us something around why are people not registered to vote. So when we look at it, remember the question we had, what is a democracy? These are questions. So the engagement, the political parties need to spend time listening. And that is a key or classic example of listening.
It definitely is. Well, we're going to be hitting the ballot boxes most of South Africa tomorrow, apart from those that have made their special votes. Let's have a look at some of the tweets that have been coming through. We've been seeing online tweets. We've also been seeing, divided houses where we've seen, some family members saying they'll be voting for the ANC, and other family members will be saying, no, we'll be voting for a different political party, whether it's EFF or DA or COPE.
So coalitions are happening all over South Africa tonight. So you'll see tweets where people, I think we saw one with a mom and a son wearing their respective political party T-shirts. There we go.
Oh, there we go.
It's a bit distorted, but I mean, that's a coalition, and that shows generational mindset. It shows where we're heading to as a country. And if there's smiles on their faces as opposed to division. So this is a classic example of how we should be looking forward to the elections and what and how we should be viewing it. But that 90% stat is worrying.
We also have another tweet here. This is going to be related to voting, specifically if you are voting for the first time. This one comes from Mans Not Barry Roo, saying that if you're going to vote tomorrow, make sure you're taking a black pen with you if possible. If an agent gives you a pencil to vote, refuse and demand a pen. Don't use a pencil. Another tip also coming here, when you vote tomorrow, make sure that the ballot papers are stamped on the reverse side. They're not stamped. Approach the IEC officials and they will stamp them. Without the stamp, they will not count at all. These are very, very important things.
And it is. And if you go back to look at if you go to the SABC app, if you go to the IEC app, just be a little bit more informed before you head off to the voting stations tomorrow. Just understand what you need to do. It's more than just putting the mark and taking the picture. It's also about how do you actually engage and prepare before you walk in there.
Unfortunately, that's all we have time for this evening on Eye on Elections. We continue with the rolling coverage that we're seeing online with regards to social media, Instagram, and all the support that political parties are having online, as well as what voters have to say upon the ballot box that South Africans will be hitting tomorrow.
This week on Trends Travel, we take you behind the scenes and also into the mud at the first ever Monster Truck Juggernaut Monster Jam Festival. We also give you a taste of authentic Indian street food straight from the streets of Kerala, India. All this and so much more. So be sure not to miss out this Saturday at 5:30 p.m.
When South Africans go to the polls, SABC News gives you names you can trust. Sakina, Criselda, Peter, Stephen, Tsepiso, Francis, Blaine, Leanne. South Africa votes. Live coverage starts Wednesday at 6 a.m. on SABC News.
We're explorers. We always have been. Endlessly curious. Always looking for answers. For new frontiers. For new stories. Because that is who we are. From script to screen. From yelling action to taking you on a journey. Radio producers, script writers, on-air presenters, news reporters, sports analysts. We spend late nights creating captivating storylines and earlier mornings keeping you informed, educated, and entertained. For us, it's not a job, it's a calling. We do this and more because you do your part. SABC TV licenses, made possible by you.
In a UN report, scientists say climate change is getting worse.
1/3 of our food sources for the population come out of the ocean.
We spoke to people who have been directly affected.
We have lost a lot of cattle. Gemsbokvlakte, Tosca gebied and Jakkalskop. Everywhere you will see there's animals dying.
I've lost 2 of my cattle this January.
Africa's demand for clean drinking water is rising.
Drinking water is a top priority.
The next day when the water comes back, it's dirty.
I have implemented a level 5 water restriction, effective immediately.
Environmentalists seek solutions to preserve the planet.
This is a Cape Kirpa, which is also one of the endemic species that is only found within the Western Cape, so it occurs nowhere else in the world except in our water systems.
Get the facts first.
In 1994, ek dink was ons almal was ook baie excited geweest.
For South Africa, art was never a good thing.
From a footballing point of view, there was never a separation.
Get to the truth.
There's still some serious issues in South Africa.
Maar ek dink die regering kan regtig probeer om harder te werk om
ke apartheid in Sutlile ke le ke swa ke batho ba rena ba democracy batho ba batsho e se makgowa.
See what it all really means.
Ek is geel want dit is die kleur in die verkeerslig wat vir jou sê wees versigtig.
I still give South Africa a red.
We are somewhere in between.
We're giving our democracy a green for sure. We're very happy.
Democracy Gauge, weekdays at 5:30 on SABC News, Channel 404.
Well, a very good evening to you once again. Thank you very much for staying with us. Now, of course, in the run-up to the elections tomorrow, we've seen quite a number of opinion polls make predictions about what the results will look like after millions of South Africans go out and vote. And political leaders we've seen, almost all of them seeking divine intervention. So we thought tonight we would invite traditional healer Gogon Toleng, perhaps to just throw the bones for us, just to find out from you, Gogon Toleng, what are you seeing about this election? We know that millions of South Africans are going out to vote, and many have coined it as the most important election post-1994. Gogo, thanks for your time.
Thank you so much, Criselda.
Yes.
Let me just ask the ancestors and find out. Do you want me guys to explain it in English for everybody to actually be able to understand?
We would appreciate that, Kokontoleng.
Thank you. What the ancestors are saying is that the political party that actually ruled from the years back is actually going to rule again. And the other parties will actually come after it. And as I ask the ancestors and I look into my calabash, the predictions that actually come by is that the ANC will be the ruling party again, and it will be 60.7%.
60.7%. And Gogo, I want us to expand on this a bit, Kokontoleng.
Yes.
You know, many are saying, are looking to know what conditions will be like in tomorrow's election. We've seen a bit of unrest in some areas. Is everything going to go smooth tomorrow? A lot has been said about some of the hotspots.
Everything is going to go very smooth. And the hotspots that they actually were actually talking about not going to vote tomorrow, the majority will actually go and vote. And then the minority, which are the people who want service deliveries and all the stuff and water and electricity, some of them, they're going to stay behind because they're not sure whether the government that's going to rule will be able to actually make their dreams and their wishes come true. But the ANC will definitely take the elections tomorrow.
And with you know, South Africans, the enthusiasm that is there, are you able to tell us anything about that? You know, we've got some in some areas that are saying they're not going to participate in the vote. You've already alluded to that. But the general sense, the mood that we should expect tomorrow?
The general sense, it's actually going to be, let me just say 80-20, you know. Some of the people, they are going to be happy to actually go vote and see change, even though some of them never saw change along the way. And then the 20%, they're going to sit and moan and groan and saying, the government never delivered. But at the end of it all, the ancestors and the bones are saying, tomorrow is actually going to go quite smooth. With all those who are striking and everything, but in the majority and the bigger parts, everything is going to go smooth.
Since you spoke about your prediction on who will take this election, I want to talk about smaller political parties. I might be stretching it a bit here. Will they have any impact, the new political parties?
They will. They will have an impact. The DA will have an impact, and the EFF will also have an impact. Probably the impact will be more than what we actually saw 5 years ago, before when we voted, but still the ruling party will still rule. They'll probably have extra 1 seat.
Is that what the bones are telling us?
They'll probably have extra 1 seat, but normally what the bones are saying, you know, and as like alluliating when there's a wedding and there's nicer things that's supposed to actually come along our way. So this will actually are the predictions of the bones. The bones might turn tomorrow because they talk a different thing every single day.
Yes.
But what I'm saying is what they're saying today is the ruling party which ruled in the years after apartheid, it will still rule, but we'll still have people who actually will change from voting for the ruling party to other opposition parties.
And in terms of turnout?
At the voting stations.
Can the bones give us any?
The turnout, if the bones sing, the turnout will be there, even though others actually have decided not to actually go and vote.
Yeah.
But you'll never know, hey? When you wake up, it's a different day. A person might say something today, and tomorrow they might change their minds and go and vote.
Anything else that the bones are telling us?
About you?
No, not about me. I think we'll leave that one for another day. Thank you so much, Kokontoleng. But in terms of tomorrow, is there anything else in particular, you know, that the bones, that we should know?
anything in particular. There will be peace, and everything will go smoothly. And in the areas where people are actually protesting not to vote, things might actually go the same as today, and they still will protest and put stones on the streets and stuff like that, and decide not to go in there and vote. And they probably would protest and go to the voting stations for people not to go in. But in general, the predictions are very good.
Gogontoleng, thank you very much for joining us this evening.
Thank you so much.
Gogontoleng joining us there, giving us, of course, her predictions. Of course, in the run-up to all the campaigning that we saw political leaders seeking divine intervention, and of course many other means to try and, of course, those opinion polls telling us about what the results will look like. So we appreciate the time of Gogontoleng, a traditional healer, for joining us here. Those are her predictions, of course, not the views of the SABC, I should indicate. And of course, all eyes are on tomorrow as millions of South Africans go out and vote.
Get the facts first.
In 1994, ek dink was ons almal was ook baie excited geweest.
For South Africa, art was never a good thing.
From a footballing point of view, there was never a separation.
Get to the truth.
There's still some serious issues in South Africa.
Maar ek dink die regering kan regtig waar probeer om harder te werk om
ke apartheid in Sutlile ke le ke sola ke batho ba rena ba democracy batho ba batsho e seng makgowa.
See what it all really means.
Ek is geel, want dit is die kleur in die verkeerslig wat vir jou sê wees versigtig.
I still give South Africa a red.
We are somewhere in between.
We're giving our democracy a green for sure. We're very happy.
But God,
Democracy Gauge, weekdays at 5:30 on SABC News, Channel 404.
When South Africans go to the polls, SABC News gives you names you can trust. Sakina, Criselda, Peter, Stephen, Tsepiso, Francis, Blaine, Leanne. South Africa votes. Live coverage starts Wednesday at 6 a.m. on SABC News.
So we've seen various opinion polls making predictions about the election results. So too do astrologers and tarot card readers, and as we saw earlier on from spiritual realm, Criselda speaking to Gogo earlier on about her predictions. So South Africans go to the polls tomorrow, 25 years after democracy, with an unprecedented number of parties contesting both the national and provincial vote. Sandy Smith is a numerologist, and she joins us now via Skype to share with us her thoughts. So, Sandy, please just tell us, why is numerology important? Obviously, we're talking about numbers that will make people win or lose, but what role do numbers play in numerology?
Well, first of all, every single party is a registered entity. It has a date of birth, as well as the persons that are running that party have also got an official date of birth, and the country has a date of birth, and we travel in cycles. So when you're in the cycle, different cycles will explain exactly where you are, where the country is, or where the party is, and you can see individually exactly where they are. Then you can look at a collective and see who could be in a working together
Sandy,
situation.
let me jump in there and ask you then, when is South Africa's official rebirth or birthday?
Our official birthday is the 31st of May 1961. That was when the Republic of South Africa was born. When we went to vote in 1994, that was a major event, obviously, and that was a change of government, but we never changed our name of the country. We still remain the Republic of South Africa. So we must look at the 31st of May, 1961.
Okay, so in light of that, then let's look at the top three contenders, the parties and their leaders. What is their date of birth, and how does it influence the outcome tomorrow?
Okay, so the ANC is born on the 8th of 1st, 1912. They are currently in a 3-8 year. Personally, with inside of the ANC, they're in a 3-year. We look at Cyril, he's born on the 17th of the 11th. I'm forgetting his year. Let me just go. His year is 1952. And he's in a double 3-year, so he's fully in line with the ANC. However, the ANC goes into their life path, which is a 4 in January. So 2 to 3 months before, there's going to be a major thing happening within the ANC. Cyril is playing a dancing game. He's keeping both fractions of his party together, or trying to keep them together. He doesn't want to make any critical moves right now, because he could actually upset the negative side of the party that's not all that for him. But if he remains president of the ANC, if he remains president of the country, he is going to clean out the ANC from top to bottom.
Okay, so let's go to the next one, the Democratic Alliance, its leader and the birth dates of both, the leader and the party.
Okay, the party is born on the 24th of June, 2000. They are in their life path year, which is a 5 personal, which says there's internal difficulties, there's discovery, there's disclosure, there's mismanagement. We've seen all of the problems with Patricia de Lille. We're seeing Helen Zille also being leaving in the next couple of days or so. So a lot of change needs to take place within the party, but they're sitting in a time of trying to step out and let people know who they are. Musi Maabane is born on the 6th of March, 1980, and it's interesting that he is in a double 3-year, so he personally is in line with the country, and it also puts him in line with the ANC, which is a very interesting thing. It puts him in line with Cyril as well.
Okay, so we need to then move on to the third party, that's the EFF, its leader and the birth date of the party. What are your predictions there, Sandy?
All right, so the party, EFF, is born on the 26th of July, 2013, and they are in an 8-5 year. So publicly, all of their negativity, their mismanagement, their power games, a lot of the fraud problems, the whole negative politicking that they've also, their rhetoric that they've had, everything is being exposed about them. It's not a pleasant year that they are in, and only will they get into focus and responsibility after their birthday in July. But that focus and responsibility is an impact year, and I don't think that they have focus correctly at the moment. They're a little bit all over the place. Julius Malema is born on the 3rd of the 3rd, 1981, and he is now 38 years of age. He's in a hell of a problematic year, because he's got a lot of legal issues, and he's unsettled about his party, he's unsettled about his position. The legal cases that he's got against him, from the Karima Brown through to the Kutsia case, etc., and there's more issues that are going to be coming his way.
I need to ask this question, Sandy, unfortunately, because we have run out of time. Your predictions, who will come out better off in this election?
Well, this is definitely a year where I don't think anybody can officially predict who is going to come in. It is I think Zapiro said it very well in 2016, where we had a collision, municipality voting and everything. it's collision, it's confusion, it's collusion. So you're going to see how the DA and the ANC, or the ANC and the EFF, or the EFF and the DA, those are the three main parties. There's no one particular party that is predominant, but I will say that Cyril is the most liked man by South Africans. I think that he has got a very, very strong chance of remaining in a power position.
Thank you very much for your time and your insights there, Sandy Smith, speaking from a numerological perspective. And you saw earlier on we got another perspective, Griselda speaking to someone from the spiritual realm, looking through their anthropological history as well. So, well, we're going to bring you the latest as and when it happens here on SABC News. Wall-to-wall coverage, so you'll be able to see for yourself who is winning or losing as we bring you the latest.
Well, Tapiso, there was a rather interesting past 10-15 minutes of the program.
So it'll be even more interesting tomorrow to see whether or not these predictions come true. And of course, as you mentioned, and we reiterate, those are the views of our guests, not of the SABC, the news crew, and we're not influenced by that. We just thought a different perspective might be worthwhile.
As should be. But of course, you can stay tuned to SABC News. We'll be bringing you rolling coverage of the elections, people casting their votes, how they feel after having cast their votes. We've got all our reporters will be live throughout the country, urban and rural areas, and nobody does it better than the SABC when it comes to, of course, covering the different areas in South Africa.
And you will help us by sending us reports of what's happening wherever you are. And if there's anything that you need to fact check, we are in close contact with the IEC, and we'll be able to help you with that. But thank you so much for watching. Do enjoy your day and go out and vote if you've registered.
Send us some pictures before straight after voting, not in the booth, but of course after you're done, and just tell us how you feel. Thank you so much for your time, and have a great evening. From Tepiso and I,
Good
cheers.
night.
Reporter Sipho Stearman. Sipho, thank you very much indeed. What are they protesting about?
Well, they're talking about their living conditions, that they don't have clean drinking water, they don't have proper toilets, they don't have proper housing.
Lopang, tell us what's happening where you are.
Early this morning, one classroom was set alight at the school. Reptiles is creeping into the classrooms like snakes.
Residents are saying that they've been failed by the Mokaga municipality.
This is what you see. People are angry. Let the municipal manager go.
We're explorers. We always have been. Endlessly curious. Always looking for answers. For new frontiers. For new stories. Because that is who we are. From script to screen, from yelling action to taking you on a journey. Radio producers, script writers, on-air presenters, news reporters, sports analysts. We spend late nights creating captivating storylines and earlier mornings keeping you informed, educated, and entertained. For us, it's not a job, it's a calling. We do this and more because you do your part. SABC TV licenses, made possible by you.
Did you know the big hole digging started in 1871 and ended on the 14th August 1914? The hole produced 2,722 kgs of diamonds. However, one diamond as huge as 490 carat of stone found in the open prior 1868 gave them the interest to dig. Extracted from 22.5 million tons of soil. Today, the hole sits at a breathtaking 214 meters deep. Kimberley Big Hole attracts tourists from all over the world, taking a vintage tram past the city, then cycling around the Big Hole.
That's the conversation we're having right here on SABC News Channel. Full view, or sports on full view anyway. We speak all things cricket. As you can see, the trophy is right there next to me. The Lions coach is right with us here in studio. We're chatting that and much, much more. So do stay with us. Interesting show we're expecting. But first, the big story of the day. As you heard early this afternoon, Athletics South Africa and the SABC have reached an agreement that will see the public broadcaster televise the Federation's upcoming athletics events after missing out on the broadcast of the Two Oceans Marathon a couple of weeks ago. The upcoming Comrades Marathon, the Cape Town as well as Soweto Marathons will be, well, live on free-to-air television. That's, of course, on the event days now. My colleague Peter Andorra spoke to Athletics South Africa President Alex Kosana as well as SABC Chief Operations Officer Dr. Craig van Rooyen.
And we are proud to announce that the 3 races will be broadcasted by SABC, the Comrades Marathon, the Cape Town Marathons, as well as the Soweto Marathon. And apart from that, there will be other marathons that we'll be negotiating with SABC where it is very important for such marathons to be broadcasted in different parts of the country. And negotiations for the further contract for the 3-year, it's going to start soon, which is going to focus on 2020, 2021, and 2022. And we have also looked at a number of other important issues of track and field where our teams travel, where SABC will have to be as close as possible in order for the nation, for the young in particular, to be able to see their icons and their heroes and heroines being awarded for whatever they have been doing in terms of training and all that. And we urge all the people who are involved in these marathons and others to keep on focusing in the preparations for the delivery of the best events in 2019 in South Africa for the South African runners, and all those will be coming from all over the continent and beyond, as we have done over the past years. We know that Comrades Marathon is around the 9th of June, and everybody is willing to go, and we believe that the Comrades Marathon will be able to do as they always do, to make sure that they present all of us by presenting the best of the best race in the day.
With all our broadcasts, we try and do a quality broadcast, and with all the broadcasts we try and keep them to world standards. And most certainly the Comrades Marathon, the Soweto Marathon, and the Cape Town Marathon and the subsequent marathons, we will be doing a world-class broadcast for those events.
Capability in terms of resources, the SABC has been challenged financially. Will we be able to pull it off? Do we have the resources for it?
Definitely. So you're absolutely right in terms of the SABC not having money. I think that in terms of this types of broadcasting, we do a lot of planning. Mostly in the SABC, we're backed by a very good team. And as you know, the SABC teams are extremely resourceful in terms of getting an event like this done. So I'm more than confident that these events and the future events will be extremely successful.
What were some of the things that you needed to overcome?
Well, some of the challenges, of course, it's a public perception out there, and falsified information like ASA and SABC was the cause of what happened in Two Oceans. Not only that, there were quite a number of other factors that were at play that SABC could not be able to solve without us, and also us without SABC and the race organizers. But the message that we are sending out there is that whosoever wants to have his or her race broadcasted, the gate is ASA first. Then ASA will speak to SABC as a partner, and in that way you cut a very long and windy communication that is unnecessary. If you write to ASA, ASA will respond to you within a day or so, and they will sit down with SABC and look forward. But of course, we are forecast, as you'll know, that we have got track and field, we have got cross country, we have got teams. The greatest athletes of this country ran this year without the broadcast, but that is water under the bridge. And we are focusing to the future. We have ironed out all those issues, and we understand as South Africans that SABC is in a dire need of financial support from elsewhere in order for them to be able to do what they used to do. Of course, we have never had complaints over the past years. Our track and field, our cross country, our road running, even smallest events have been covered via news and all that. And we understand the situation. And I think that's what made all of us to be able to quickly arrive to a decision. And thanks to Mr. Mxakwe, the group CEO and the CEO and the team that was there, as well as the ASA team that was there. So we're looking forward to deliver the events and the whilst we are negotiating behind the scenes.
Great news indeed for all athletics lovers. Now we're joined on the line SABC athletics commentator as well as analyst Kuan Walker to chat about the importance of this agreement. Kuan, welcome to the program. Let's chat right there. I mean, it's news that will allay a lot of fears from both athletes who, well, besides the fact that they want to see themselves on television, as you know, from free to air, but also allay a lot of fears, well, to South Africa as a whole in general, that the public broadcaster will bring you some of these events as mandated by the Broadcasting Act, basically.
Yes, most definitely, Tabiso. Thanks for having me on the show. You know, as mentioned, Comrades is a worldwide institution. It's one of the most famous races in the world, as well as, you know, the Cape Town Marathon. So it's Africa's only gold label event, and Soweto Marathon, which is dubbed as a people's race. And just going back into the history of the races, we now having South Africans that are winning these races, the likes of Anne Ashworth, Bonguisa Mthembu, who's now a household name. So for the fact that SABC and ASA have managed to come together and sort this out, it's wonderful, not only for the viewers that are at home wanting to see their loved ones or watch themselves finishing after they've run their races, but also to inspire more South Africans for the heroes like Bonguisa Mthembu is turning out to be.
In fact, that's where I want to go as well with regards to the gold label status that some of these events hold. The importance of that for South Africa being able to showcase them not only locally but to the world at large.
Yes, most definitely. Cape Town Marathon, you know, it's a really iconic event in South Africa. It's growing in stature every year. And, you know, there's 6 marathons around the world, which is known as the World Marathon Majors. And I really think that within the next 2 to 3 years, we could see Cape Town Marathon become one of those. And once it gets that stature as a World Marathon Major, then you start to see the likes of the Eliud Kipchoges, the Edna Kiplagats, and those big athletes coming through. So for us to have a world-class, iconic event, you know, in our back door, it's wonderful. And for the fact that SABC as well are broadcasting it live, it's amazing.
Now, Kuan, just to take us back to the Oceans, we saw it a couple of weeks ago, the interest as well in having South Africans, such as the one we have on our screens right now, going out there and winning these events. It also plays a major role in as far as, well, sponsors. And I always say athletics is the Cinderella sport of the country, but they deserve much, much more. And broadcasting such events goes a long way.
Most definitely, and you know, not to take anything away from soccer and rugby and cricket, which has done a lot for our country, but as you mentioned, athletics is one of the Cinderella sports, and you know, with the SABC managing to broadcast these live events, it not only does good for the sports in general, but it attracts more sponsorships, as well as the athletes that you see running on the screens. They all run for their personal teams. They've got a lot of sponsorships of their own, and if their events aren't being broadcast live, it not only affects the races, which affect everyone from the front of the field to the back, but also the elite athletes' pockets at the end of the day, because they need that exposure, and by not getting it, it's bad for them at the end of the day.
Kuan Walker, thank you very much indeed for joining us. We'll be catching up a bit more, but later on, in fact, with the comrades coming up, the Cape Town Marathon coming up, and Soweto Marathon, we'd like to, well, it'd be interesting to have a chat with you with regards to that. Thank you very much. Kuan Walker, in-house SABC cricket, or not cricket rather, but athletics analyst as well as commentator. Speaking of cricket, the South African cricket team has been dealt a huge blow with just 23 days to go until the 2019 Cricket World Cup in England and Wales. Now, fast bowler Anrich Nokia is out with a fractured thumb and will be replaced by all-rounder Chris Morris. And further worrying news for the Proteas bowling department, Kagiso Rabada and Dale Steyn are still on the injury list now. While the team is confident that both can make a recovery in time for the World Cup, nothing is yet certain.
Nokia fractured his thumb in training in Port Elizabeth yesterday. The 24-year-old was expected to make an impact at the World Cup, but he does have a history of injuries. He was also ruled out of the Indian Premier League this season due to a shoulder injury. Morris enters the squad as a valuable all-rounder with the ability to dig deep when needed with both the bat and ball. However, when it comes to Rabada and Steyn, there is little clarity as to their conditions. Rabada is nursing a back strain while Steyn has an injured shoulder. Both players have been categorized as works in progress, and that's cause for alarm in the Proteas camp.
It could go either one of two ways. In some instances, you might find people that will galvanize and motivate because they need to work harder in the team space. And sometimes it might affect, to say that one or two of your senior players. But knowing the South African team ethics and the thinking, there's no doubt that we'll be motivated to make sure that we give ourselves the best opportunity to perform well and to win the World Cup.
While player workloads are managed, it seems that Rabada could have picked up his lumbar muscle strain while traveling to match venues during the Indian Premier League.
In terms of KG and the IPL, we got to take in consideration flights and the amount of flights in India. They don't always sit in the most comfortable domestic flights. He is a tall boy as well. So playing that amount of cricket, sitting for protracted amounts of times, does play a factor in how a fast bowler will recover.
It's not all bad news. JP Dumini, Lungi Ngidi and Tobias Shamsi have all fully recovered from their injuries. Simon Burke, SABC News, Johannesburg.
Thank you very much, this Simon. Now tonight we have with us the Highveld Lions coach whose team has just won the Cricket South Africa T20 Challenge in Enoch Thabiso Nkwe. I tell you what, Thabiso just happens to be all good things that Thabiso's. Good evening, sir. Welcome to the SABC News Channel, Sports in Full View. First and foremost, these trophies. It's been an exceptional season as usual.
No, absolutely. You know, the team has actually played well. You know, it wasn't a best of starts. I mean, it wasn't an easy start. You know, because obviously the team needed to get used to the new methods and the way we want to do things, how we want to achieve, and the process that we put in place. You know, just the way the team has actually responded in a short period of time. You know, showed a lot of maturity and professionalism. You know, it's been unbelievable.
I say as usual because the Highveld Lions have started to make a knack of it, of winning trophies. It's I think of the past couple of years, you've won quite a few, so it's not that bad. I mean, you seem to be have a good thing as far as this franchise is concerned, isn't it? Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's based in Joburg. There's a lot of pressure. You know, there's a lot of expectations. Yeah, I mean, over the years, we haven't won as many as we wanted to. Yeah, and I mean, great that this season we had that opportunity, to bring home, in total, I mean, 4 trophies. There's only 3 here, but under our franchise, we brought in 4 trophies. So it just goes to show, if you
if you put in certain structures in place, you know, most players will respond to that, you know, and that's what has happened.
I always ask, you know, most of us, well, here at SABC News, are always interested in the development of players and the pool of players. You mentioned Johannesburg. I mean, I always speak of and think of the Soweto Cricket Oval, where a lot of youngsters, you know, grow up and they want one day to play for a club like the Highfield Lions, and you've got one of, if I can say, one of the well-balanced, transformed teams in as far as the franchise are concerned. I mean, does it play a role? I mean, to get in those not-so cricket faces into the stadiums, and we've seen with the Guijo squad just recently at the Wanderers, you're appealing to some not-so-usual faces at cricket.
Yeah, that's been a drive, you know. I mean, Wanele has done a great job, you know. He's coming in a short period of time, you know, tap into a different market. We saw it also in the MSL. I think MSL also played a massive role, you know, to, you know, I mean, SABC, by televising it on SABC, I think it tapped into a totally different market, you know, which over the last sort of 3 months, it did attract those new faces, including international features and obviously domestic features, and it helps also, you know, myself having grown, you know, through the system, you know, from Soweto, played for Soweto Cricket Club and played professionally, and now coaching. And then the likes of Themba Bavuma, you know.
I want you to go there, yes.
Yeah, you know.
He's been quite a revelation, captains as well.
No, absolutely. You know, he's taken the leadership very, very well, you know, and he has led the team so well, I mean, throughout the system consistently, and he has shown a lot of presence, and that actually rubbed off into his batting as well. And
it was a great knock he had just recently as well. I mean, that 100.
Exceptional. Yeah, I mean, that was world class.
It's also an interesting aspect of the game. You know, you speak about, you know, the leadership of Themba Bavuma. How much of a role does that play in having somebody who's... I mean, I've spoken to Themba before. You always think that he's one for the future. Captain of the Proteas one day, as far as I'm concerned, because he has that in him. Then sometimes he's not playing for the Proteas. How do you go around or go about as the coach saying, look, stick in there. You know you're good enough. One day that will be yours, because you ask anyone, they'll tell you Themba Bavuma deserves a seat at the table, so to speak.
Yeah, I think his time will come. You know, we strongly believe that, you know, one day he'll captain the Proteas. You know, we just don't know in which format, but we strongly believe he's one of the future leaders. He has proven it this season. He's always had it in him, you know, from young age, you know, throughout the pipeline. Obviously, I mean, he needed to really invest a lot into his game, because he, you know, over the last couple of years, you know, since getting that exposure at international cricket, he really needed to find his feet as quickly as possible. And I mean, he's got a massive drive, you know, within himself. He wants to be a world-class cricketer, and obviously with the opportunity now of leading the franchise, I think that will almost fast-track everything, you know, to where he wants to get to, you know. And I mean, he's a solid role model. If you look at not only, you know, in the townships, but I think in general, just like how he led the franchise. You know, a lot of players in the team, they look up to him. He has such a solid cricket brain, not only just with cricket, but also with life, you know. And
well-grounded. He's a well-grounded young man.
Yeah, I mean, a proper all-rounder, you may say.
Let's speak about, I mean, we're running out of time, but I have to ask you this. With the Cricket World Cup coming up, that relationship with yourself and Otis Gibson, how is it?
Yeah, I mean,
I asked that because, you know, as a coach, you'd want to have I'd say, good positive relationship with the national team coach. Hopefully get some of your players in there, of course, on merit, but, you know, it's always good to have an open line of field. Is it something that happens in cricket more than I think we'd want to assume in rugby and soccer, for example? Coaches now want this player to play like this. Does it happen a lot?
I mean, at the end of the day, we're the feeding system, you know, to the Proteas. So it's very healthy to have those type of relationships. I know that was one of his big things, you know, when he came on board to try and grow a relationship with franchise coaches, because he knows the meaningful role that we play, you know, in order to feed him with the right type of players. And also the brand of cricket that he wants to promote, you know, becomes a lot easier. We don't have to go through 2-3 people, you know, to get the message across. So, and his biggest thing is wherever he goes around the country with the Proteas, you know, just to invite a local coach, in whichever franchise, to come into the dressing room, just to understand how the Proteas do things. So he's been very good at that,
As a coach, which one of these, I'm sure all of them, there's one that stands out better, but as a coach, you always want to sit back and say achievements, obviously you'd like to get more of these on a personal note.
Yeah, no, absolutely. You know, this is just the foundation. You know, we've laid as a team, and obviously as a coach, you like to win many more trophies. You know, from my side, you know, we have a big picture. You know, we want to get the Lions franchise, you know, into the global stage. Yeah. You know, that's a big picture, and in order to do that, we have to win trophies. You know, we're based in Joburg. There's always that, like I said, there's always that added pressure. Joburg teams, you know, there's always that image about them, but that's something that we gotta live up to. Yeah.
Coach Nkwe, I know the time is up. They tell me that no more questions for the coach, but I'm going to drag you into this one. I'm going to ask our director to put another sport on the video wall, because as a coach, you sit back and you're like, yeah, everyone has a favorite. I know you're a cricket man. Let's turn right to our right-hand side. Sundowns versus Golden Arrows. The league is heating up. Second to last game for these two. What are your thoughts? What do you make about the PSL?
Yeah, I haven't followed a lot of it, but recently, I know that, you know, Orlando Pirates and some Mamelodi Sundowns.
So you're a Pirates fan?
No, I'm actually not. I'm actually more Sundowns.
You're Sundowns fan. Well, Sundowns are leading 2-0. This is obviously goals scored in the first half. In fact, one of my directors telling me you can take 30 seconds or so of this match. Before I take those 30 seconds, what do you think? Who's going to win the league? Let's be honest. Sundowns, if they win this now, I think if they win this match, I think it's nearly curtains for them, for the rest of the league.
I mean, I would love Sundowns to win.
Love Sundowns to win.
Yeah, I mean, just looking at the past couple of years, what Pisa has done with the team, the culture, you know, the systems he's put in place is unbelievable. You can see almost how the team has transformed, and that's actually exciting to see. So, you know, it will be a very solid reward, you know, for this club. You know,
well, coach, you know. Okay, anyway, let's listen in. Let's take a quick couple 30 seconds of this match before we say goodbye to you. Let's listen in.
Yes, the ball in. Slightly better quality. And they've got themselves a chance there, Golden Arrows. In the end, it was too close to Dennis Onyango.
Sundowns players in that attack are very isolated. Once again, the point made that the movement of the midfielders in the defensive line to close the gap so that they can play or find one another with ease like it happened in the first half is not happening.
How much of that is Arrows doing rather than Sundowns letting their foot off the pedal? How much of what we're seeing in the change of momentum here in the second half about the Arrows approach?
The change is made. If you're going to help it, and if it works in this fashion, obviously, I think fatigue is also another part that is putting on the Sundowns side. In the freshness, the passes, it was going to take its toll at some stage. Remember, they're coming from that situation whereby they've played that many games, so you can't perform at the same tempo throughout the 90 minutes. I think that is also crept in.
Well, you mentioned games.
Well, as we watch those visuals, news that came in literally about an hour, 45 minutes ago is the fact that Mamelodi Sundowns, although involved in this match and they're currently leading the Premier Soccer League, are set to be appealing the decision from the DC. That, of course, means that will the Wayne Arendse issue with regards to him being an eligible player to play. So Sundowns, although they could win this match tonight and go up in the lead, and as far as the Premier Soccer League stands are concerned, a result could mean that some of this falls to naught. A lot of things are possible. Sundowns could be stripped of the 1 point that they received in the match against Wits, or they could just be, well, garnered a bigger sentencing. That's one of the stories we're just going to pick up and run with a bit later on. In other news, well, geez, if you want to know what's happening in Europa, in fact, not Europa, but rather Champions League, Liverpool, they without Mo Salah in tonight's match. That match is just about to kick off. They play against Barcelona in the UEFA Champions League. That match kicks off. Unfortunately, we've run out of time. We can't even cross to it. In fact, my director tells me we can leave you the live pictures out from Liverpool with that match. But myself and the team, you have yourself a wonderful evening. Coach, thank you very much indeed for joining us. And hopefully we have more from you and you come and join us with these.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for having me on the show.
Thank you very much, Coach. Cool.
It's something similar needed tonight. And at least this time they've got 90 minutes to do it.
Hello, I'm Nana, and I want to tell you a bit about Economics Unbound. It is a live studio current affairs program that brings an understanding of the economy, how it operates, and how it is managed. The show seeks to include ordinary South Africans in purposeful and well-informed discussions about the economy,
The whole corruption and having to pay people to get businesses, it's like killing our businesses.
while providing them with enough information to make better economic and financial decisions.
And we need to start thinking of new ways of creating new structures that are relevant at the time.
Through this program, audiences can look forward to 30 minutes of deep and tough questioning on the issues of the week.
Why do you think that our economy lends itself to such collusive behavior and such concentration of monopolies in key sectors?
When South Africans go to the polls, SABC News gives you names you can trust. Sakina, Criselda, Peter, Stephen, Tsepiso, Francis, Blaine, Leanne. South Africa votes. Live coverage starts Wednesday at 6 a.m. on SABC News.
The SABC News mobile app is your one-stop digital portal to all the news you need. Stay connected with the latest in breaking news. Watch the SABC News channel along with clips and live streams of all the big news events. And listen to all the SABC News radio stations live, including podcasts and much more. Simply download the SABC News app to your Android or iOS device from either the Play Store or the App Store. SABC News, independent, impartial.
Very good evening to you and welcome to News at 9. I'm Flona Daba. Let's take a look at your headlines tonight.
Let us all go and vote for a better tomorrow. Let us vote for a brighter future. Let us go to the polls on the 8th of May and together determine our country's future.
A message from the President on the eve of the nation's 6th democratic elections. Meanwhile, Giyani community is defying the President's call to go out and vote tomorrow. The community says there will be no vote in the area unless members arrested for attacking IEC officials are released. More than 20 people arrested after a community hall and clinic was torched at Viljoenskroon in the Free State. Once again, a warm welcome to you. President Cyril Ramaphosa has urged South Africans to exercise their democratic right tomorrow. Ramaphosa says many people sacrificed everything during the apartheid era to secure the right of all South Africans to vote. Polling stations open at 7 a.m. and will close at 9 p.m. The president says people must make use of the opportunity.
Fellow South Africans, it is 25 years since we all won the right to vote, when South Africans of all races, from different backgrounds, in every part of the country cast their ballots in our first democratic election. With our votes, we ushered in a new era of peace, democracy, and unity that has endured and flourished over the past 25 years. On Wednesday, the 8th of May, all South Africans will once again have an opportunity to decide their own destiny. The day has been declared a public holiday so as to allow all registered voters to go and vote for the party of their choice in national and provincial elections. In doing so, together we will be exercising the right that was won through decades of struggle and sacrifice. We will also be exercising a responsibility that we have to future generations to build a country that is at peace, that is united, democratic, fair and prosperous. I'm therefore calling on all South Africans to go out and vote on Wednesday, the 8th of May. Voting stations will open at 7 a.m. and close at night at 9 p.m. Please remember to take your green ID book or your smart card ID or a valid temporary ID certificate to the voting station. Remember to vote twice, once for national government and the other for provincial government. We wish all parties well in this election and ask every candidate and every party agent to help ensure a free, fair and peaceful election. Let us all go and vote for a better tomorrow. Let us vote for a brighter future. Let us go to the polls on the 8th of May and together determine our country's future. I thank you.
Well, the IEC has warned that disrupting an election is a criminal offence. The Commission was briefing the media at the Results Operations Centre in Pretoria on its readiness for tomorrow's election. It says the special voting period has enabled it to iron out challenges.
The stage is set for the country's 6th general election. More than 22,000 voting stations will open at 7 o'clock in the morning until 9 o'clock in the evening. The IEC is warning voters to be vigilant when exercising their right to vote and ensure that the ballot paper is stamped. 2 policemen will be deployed in each voting station.
Citizens are reminded that any disruption to elections constitute a criminal offense. And our view is that enough protests have been had, people's issues have been heard. Now is the opportunity for the voter to express themselves.
The Commission is also satisfied with how the special votes were conducted. It says the Eastern Cape and Northwest provinces had a high number of home visits. However, political analysts are predicting a low voter turnout in this election. The Commission has urged the South Africans to go out in their numbers to cast their votes.
The Electoral Commission calls on every South African citizen to celebrate our 25th anniversary of democracy by ensuring tomorrow's election take place in the spirit of 1994.
Home Affairs offices will be opened on voting day to allow people to collect their IDs. Lula Mamakya, SABC News at the Results Operations Centre.
Communities around Giani in Limpopo say they will shun tomorrow's poll because of the arrest of 2 people who allegedly attacked IEC officials and destroyed voting material. Roads leading to villages such as Goela and Mbetle have been barricaded.
Special voting in this area has been disrupted. Voting stations remain closed. Of the 66 people who applied for special votes, only 7 managed to cast their ballots. And today residents reaffirmed an earlier resolution to boycott the polls. They have been demanding a third road for some time.
The decision is made that we are not going to vote. That's the reason why you see many people are here. So we are not going to vote as the community.
Us as youth of Mngongoma, it looks as if we are undermined because it's the older people. According to me, it's useless to lead with be with older people. We need them to be removed and give us the chance as youth so that we can fight for our village.
The area is tense and police are maintaining a strong presence. The arrested suspects are expected to appear in the Giani Magistrates Court on Thursday. Few hours before the national general election, this is how the road that leads to Mngongoma looks like. People here are saying that they are not expecting IEC officials to come in because they have taken a decision as the community that no one is going to vote. This is where 2 people were arrested for disrupting elections. It's not clear at this stage as to whether police will be here to assist those who are willing to do so. Mike Maringa, SABC News, Ngongoma Village.
National Police Commissioner Kehla Setole visited Mahikeng in the Northwest Province today for a final check of police readiness for tomorrow's elections. His day started with a parade in Mahikeng before he visited an area identified as a flashpoint.
83 areas in the Northwest have been identified as hotspots in the province. Villages around Mahikeng, Kraipan and Khanyesa have been hard hit by protests, with residents burning down vehicles and government buildings and blockading roads. While in Limpopo, robbers stole election material from a voting station. However, Commissioner Setole says he has deployed 51,000 police officers around the country to ensure safety and security during elections. The commissioner visited one voting station in the troubled Itakom village and laid down the law.
The actual instruction, which I think we have corrected now, is that they must be here permanently together with the IEC, because the voting station may be attacked, especially when you have the ballot boxes now closed. They may also make attempts to try and maybe steal the ballot boxes or rob them.
Northwest Provincial Elections head Tumelo Ntletiba says they are ready for the voters tomorrow.
Police officers are there to escort our security materials, particularly our ballot papers, but they should not be seen as looking out for danger, because we do not expect any danger whatsoever.
I am Tsepiso Victor Motlogelwa, SABC in Mahikeng.
Well, police in Kwazulu-Natal are investigating alleged death threats against IEC officials who've been warned not to open some voting stations in the province tomorrow. This was announced by the Justice, Crime Prevention and Security Cluster during a media briefing in Durban. Affected voting stations are in 3 municipalities.
On the eve of South Africa's most highly contested poll, IEC staff are reportedly receiving death threats. It's believed the threats have been made through phone calls and text messages. They are allegedly instructing the IEC officials not to open voting stations or be killed.
We have received a report that the IEC staff have been threatened in Alfred Duma municipality, Umkanyagude and Zululand. We must work towards ensuring that IEC staff are protected and safe to do their work of delivering credible elections.
Kaunda has promised that security will be posted at all 4,884 voting stations in the province to ensure the safety of the 5.5 million registered voters.
The majority of the personnel deployed are members of the South African Police Services who have been deployed to all voting stations in the province. Other specialized teams will be placed on standby to assist with the reinforcements if any need arises.
The police have also received information that truck drivers plan to blockade the N2 and the N3. They've warned that they will act against anyone who broke the law and prevent citizens from voting. Londi Khateb, SABC News, Durban.
Right, we're going to cross live to our reporter Sibongile Mkani-Mbolweni, who is in Ermelo, Mpumalanga. A video has emerged of what seems to be IEC officials with open ballot boxes in their cars. Let's cross live there then to Sibongile. Sibongile, good evening to you. Let's cross live to Sibongile.
Yes,
Sibongile, good evening.
We're coming to you live from Ermelo, as you have mentioned, where that video has come to us. We were approached by members of the EFF saying that that video they had taken themselves earlier on, and that the presiding officer of the IEC had a ballot box opened without being sealed, and they were putting ballot papers, used ballot papers inside it, at the back of their bakkie, not inside the center, which is why they took that video. We were hoping to have the EFF members with us here now, but they are saying that they are on their way. They are waiting for the structure, for their leaders to give a go-ahead. Some of their leaders are coming from Piet Retief, which is about 100 kilometers away from here, to tell us to comment on the video, but the person that we spoke to earlier is the one that said they took the video because they are saying that the IEC official moved with the boxes from the center where there are party agents observing. They took them out and they went outside at their bakkie only to find that the boxes were still opened, and they only sealed them, as you see there in the video, after they had put some ballot papers there. Now they've reported this to the IEC. We phoned Sibusiso Nkosi earlier on to confirm this, and he said that what is being done in the video, we forwarded the video to him, saying that what is done by that IEC official in the video is actually wrong, because that ballot box is supposed to be sealed and they can't be doing anything on the ballot boxes outside the center where there are observers. But my colleague Tumelo Machoko is in Bombela, where the IEC head office is for the province, to talk to the IEC, to tell us if that presiding officer, what will happen to her, those two, and what will happen tomorrow morning. But tomorrow morning we will try and go to that voting station here in Emelo in the township, just to check if that lady is there and what has happened, on what action has the IEC taken against that person.
All right, Spongile, thanks for that update. And as you mentioned, of course, we are then crossing to our reporter, Tumelo Mashoko, who is at the IEC Center in Nelspruit, Mpumalanga. We'll perhaps get an understanding there from an IEC official as to what's been done in that case. So thank you very much to you, Spongile. Let's cross then to Tumelo there at the IEC Center. Tumelo, good evening to you. Can you give us an understanding of exactly what's happened with this video? We understand that IEC officials were seen, and the video's out there, with open ballot boxes in their cars and inserting votes inside there today. What's happening, and what are IEC officials saying in explanation?
Well, Florence, by the time we got that information from our colleague Spongile, who is based in Emelo, we were sent here into the IEC election to the Rock here in Bombela to come and speak to the IEC about this situation that has taken place in Emelo. But so far, when we got here, the IEC officials have already left. As I'm speaking to you now, Flo, it's quite empty here. There is literally no one here to come and speak to us. We spoke to the IEC earlier on over the phone. They were telling us that they are investigating this case, but so far they don't have any information. The only information that they have is the information that we as the SABC have actually forwarded to them, because they don't have any details of what happened here. So the IEC at the moment, they told us that they will give us an interview around 9 o'clock. That's when we called them, around 8:30, to come and speak to them about this situation. By the time we arrived to the IEC Center here, the person that we were supposed to speak to on this matter just went onto the call with us and saying that they've already left the center, and they will start investigating this incident as early as tomorrow in the morning, to make sure that they find out what really happened there. But Spongile is raising a very important point there, that what is going to happen to that officials, to those two officials that were seen with boxes, with ballot boxes that were still being putting in those ballot papers into the boxes. What will happen to them? Will they still be working tomorrow? Will they still be helping people to vote tomorrow? Because we understand these kind of situations, they don't take place like that. We were told by Sibusiso Nkosi, who is the communication director, that that situation was not supposed to happen like that. We're not supposed to take ballot papers and put them into that ballot box, because it's not how it's supposed to happen, especially outside the building or outside the premises where the people are supposed to be voting, because there was no officials, presiding officer around those two officials that were working there. There were also no police officer or party agents around those people that were caught and filmed putting ballot papers into that ballot box. But so far the communication here has been very, very, very poor, because they have not come forward with more information to tell us more what really happened here, and what is action that they're going to take to make sure that those perpetrators, those two officials, will they still have the job by tomorrow? Will they still be working and they'll still be helping people? Because we understand this is not the right way, it is not a right procedure to actually go ahead and do a situation such as this one, because it is not procedural, and also they can face they can face action from the IEC and also from the even from the police, because it's not allowed to do what they have done. Flo?
All right. Well, we hope to get a full understanding as to what's going on. And, of course, we will keep abreast of the story. To well understand, you will be chatting to IEC members then at 9 o'clock in the morning, so we can understand what's actually happened, to see if possibly they have an explanation. Could have been perhaps something to do with special votes. Let's see. We'll get that update as soon as possible. Of course, SABC on top of that story. More news after the break. Do stay with us.
We do not just speak, we let every voice in our nation find full expression in language and in culture. We do not just teach, we empower all people with education. We do not just bring you the news, we place you where the news is happening. We do not just entertain, we take you on journeys. We do not just broadcast sport, we create an arena for sporting heroes to inspire you. Ours is not just a job, it's a calling to ensure that everyone in our nation is informed, educated, and entertained. We're able to do this because you do your part. SABC TV licenses, it's all made possible by you.
When South Africans go to the polls, SABC News gives you names you can trust. Sakina, Criselda, Peter, Stephen, Tsepiso, Francis, Blaine, Leanne. South Africa votes. Live coverage starts Wednesday at 6 a.m. on SABC News.
Thank you very much for staying with the news at 9. Well, let's get back into it. 24 people have been arrested for public violence at Viljoenskroon in the Free State. This follows violent service delivery protests that resulted in the torching of a community hall and clinic. Angry residents complain about poor water supply, nepotism and unemployment. Tensions have been simmering between residents and local authorities for several weeks now. The Motlaka municipality has been on a knife's edge. Disgruntled residents have now taken their anger to the streets, and learning and teaching have been disrupted. They have threatened to boycott tomorrow's elections. Billionaire businessman Patrice Motsepe has taken BLF leader Andile Mngxitama to court over comments he made last month. The controversial leader accused Motsepe of instigating regime change in Botswana. Mngxitama referred to the mining magnate as one of those craving Botswana diamonds. He alleged that Motsepe was receiving assistance from his sister, Bridget Radebe, wife of Energy Minister Jeff Radebe. The South Gauteng High Court postponed the matter. Motsepe wants the court to interdict Mngxitama from making comments about him. But Mngxitama says he stands by his views.
Patrice said he wants to meet us in court on the 7th, which is today. We are here.
Yes, we are.
Our lawyers were here. You saw them. When we arrived in court, Patrice's lawyer said they are not ready. Yeah. They asked for an extension until Thursday, 10 a.m. Patrice said he's bringing this matter to court on urgency. It is an urgent matter. It must be heard now. We said, let us meet in court. You see, he thought he's going to intimidate us. He thought when he says he's bringing us to court, we will fold and ask for forgiveness. We are not retracting any statement that we have made. We shall meet Patrice Motsepe in court. We are back here Thursday. We are going to defeat him in the same way that we have defeated AfriForum and we have defeated Freedom Front Plus.
Xolani Mkiva, says that they believe that the king should be released and that they are not being opportunistic.
The last 4 years, we have been engaging with government. It cannot be a post-colonial government that begins to jail a king in a context of what actually happened.
Bobby Solomons, he's the spokesperson of the Alex Shutdown Committee, the multi-billion rand Alexander Renewal Project. Nothing came of that.
Community wants to know what really happened to the money.
The creative director of the label, Mansu, that of course means black is beautiful in Sesotho. What has been your experience in that regard, given, you know, some of the more established labels that you have managed to work with?
It is hard. 15 years is a long time. There's a lot of sacrifice for your family to make for you.
This is the thing. This is it this morning.
Welcome back. Let's take a look at your sports news. The South African cricket team has been dealt a huge blow with just 23 days to go to the 2019 Cricket World Cup in England and Wales. Fast bowler Andrew Knoke is out with a fractured thumb and will be replaced by all-rounder Chris Morris. In further worrying news for the Proteas, bowling department Kagiso Rabada and Dale Steyn are still on the injury list, while the team is confident that both can make a recovery in time for the World Cup. Nothing is certain.
Then it'll be magic. But here you get
Nokia fractured his thumb in training in Port Elizabeth yesterday. The 24-year-old was expected to make an impact at the World Cup, but he does have a history of injuries. He was also ruled out of the Indian Premier League this season due to a shoulder injury. Morris enters the squad as a valuable all-rounder, with the ability to dig deep when needed with both the bat and ball. However, when it comes to Rabada and Steyn, there is little clarity as to their conditions. Rabada is nursing a back strain, while Steyn has an injured shoulder. Both players have been categorized as works in progress, and that's cause for alarm in the Proteas camp.
It could go either one of two ways. In some instances, you might find people that will galvanize and motivate because they need to work harder in the team space. And sometimes it might affect, to say that one or two of your senior players. But knowing the South African team ethics and the thinking, there's no doubt that we'll be motivated to make sure that we give ourselves the best opportunity to perform well and to win the World Cup.
While player workloads are managed, it seems that Rabada could have picked up his lumbar muscle strain while traveling to match venues during the Indian Premier League.
In terms of KG and the IPL, we got to take in consideration flights and the amount of flights in India. They don't always sit in the most comfortable domestic flights. He is a tall boy as well. So playing that amount of cricket, sitting for protracted amounts of times, does play a factor in how a fast bowler will recover.
It's not all bad news. JP Dumini, Lungi Ngidi and Tobias Shamsi have all fully recovered from their injuries. Simon Burke, SABC News, Johannesburg.
Right, well, that's it from me, Flo Ladova. Thank you very much for tuning into SABC3 and Channel 404 for News at 9. Enjoy what's left of your evening. Your weather is up next. Take care. Cheers.
Thank you very much, and let's take a look at those conditions that are expecting over the country for tonight and also for tomorrow. We have two systems that are active for tonight. We have a surface trough that is over Navimbia, extending into that western interior of the country, and also we have this cold front that is sitting just over the southern coast and extending into the northern Cape, causing this 30 to 60% chance of showers and thunder showers for tonight and extending all the way into that interior of the eastern Cape. Partly cloudy conditions are expected expected for the rest of that central interior, extending towards those eastern interior for tonight. Tomorrow, morning fog patches expected along that escarpment of Limpopo, extending Mpumalanga and KwaZulu-Natal. That cold front will be over that southeastern coastline, extending all the way into Free State, causing that 30 to 60% chance of showers and thunder showers for tomorrow. Secondary development of a cold front is expected to make landfall over Cape Town the next day in the afternoon, with clear conditions expected as we move towards the northern interior of the Northern Cape. We have a warning of severe thunderstorms over that eastern interior of the Western Cape, possibility of heavy downpours over those areas for tonight. And tomorrow we have a special advisory for those voting stations that are over that extreme western part of the northwest, extending into that eastern parts of the Northern Cape and also over that extreme western part of Free State. Possibility of strong winds over those areas of 35 to 45 kilometers per hour over those areas. Now, overnight temperatures still experiencing some relatively cold conditions for tonight, and with Sunderland expecting a low of 0 and a maximum rather of 19, with hot temperatures as we move towards Limpopo for tomorrow. That's all the weather I have for you. Good night.
We've seen that Brent crude oil rise about 30% this year alone.
Brent crude that's going steadily firmer speaks to a global economy that's in good shape. What we don't want to see are supply interruptions or sudden spikes.
The Bank of Athens has become GrowBank. It plans to be a bank using digital and personable relations with its customers in the agricultural and food value chain space.
We're a lucky bank in that we are small. We're already working with artificial intelligence to allow us to manage our customer data.
Agriculture is a business. If we're going to take people, millions of them out of poverty, we've got to turn agriculture into a mega sector that works for everybody.
When South Africans go to the polls, SABC News gives you names you can trust. Sakina, Criselda, Peter, Stephen, Tsepiso, Francis, Blaine, Leanne. South Africa votes. Live coverage starts Wednesday at 6 a.m. on SABC News.
Did you know the big hole digging started in 1871 and ended on the 14th August 1914? The hole produced 2,722 kgs of diamonds. However, one diamond as huge as 490 carat of stone found in the open prior 1868 gave them the interest to dig. Extracted from 22.5 million tons of soil. Today, the hole sits at a breathtaking 214 meters deep. Kimberley Big Hole attracts tourists from all over the world, taking a vintage tram past the city, then cycling around the Big Hole.
In under 10 hours, 22,924 voting stations will be open from 7 a.m., ready to welcome the 26.7 million registered South African voters. Well, this is what we'll be focusing on tonight on The Globe on SABC News, coming to you live from Johannesburg. A very good evening to you. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm Simpiwe Ngwane.
A very good evening indeed. My name is Palisa Chubisi. As Simpiwe said, the focus really on the election. The clock is ticking as it is now, with less than 10 hours before the polling stations open officially. Good evening. Welcome to The Globe on the SABC News channel. Independent and impartial. Let's get on to it.
International observer missions are praising South Africa's politicians and citizens for their conduct during campaigns.
Observers from Zimbabwe, Kenya, India and Myanmar say they are looking forward to the election day.
These election observers come from different countries. They are here to be the eyes and the ears of the international community.
Normally, when you are some 3 days before elections in Zimbabwe, the situation is so tense. It's so tense. When I was told we were going for a rally somewhere in Soweto, I said, my God, are we going to be safe? Because our understanding back home is that Soweto is one of the areas that is a violent-prone area. So I thought maybe I was going to witness what we normally do in Zimbabwe. Some few days before the elections, we are always at each other's throat. There is that no freedom of association. People are not allowed to really go freely, do their campaign. But what I witnessed here, I said, is this Africa? Is this South Africa that I know? Or I'm in Europe. It was so free. You could see somebody putting on a DA t-shirt, somebody putting on a ANC t-shirt, the EFF t-shirt, going around their business without even intimidating to each other.
Myanmar is also represented, and this observer believes there is something her country can learn from South Africa.
We are a very young democracy country, and we are going to have the third general election in 2020. So we have everything to learn from South Africa, and the way that the parties campaign, the way the election commission organize the election, and then the way they invite the international election observer and all that. All these we can learn from South Africa.
India is also currently awaiting election results.
Another part is the role that social media, fake news, and really misappropriation of the media space, the impact that has on communities and people. Certainly in South Asia, you've seen a very cynical ways of manipulating social media, and that has had very unfortunate effects, violence, etc.
During the 2017 elections in Kenya, the country was on the brink of conflict. The African Union mission was led by former President of South Africa, Thabo Mbeki, came under fire from the country's opposition. But today, they are singing a different tune.
There were more experiences we had not had. But right now, we have had the experience, and hence that's the way forward, and that's the way we have maintained our country peacefully. Personally, I would give an apology because we ought to have taken that realization at the time of his approach. There would have been no more bloodshed. But because we ignored it and we thought we were on the right track, we went astray.
The observers will be deployed to different polling stations during voting. SADC has indicated that it will issue a preliminary report by Friday. Sophie Mkwen, SABC News, Johannesburg.
And for more on the role of Observer Mission, we are now joined in live in our studios in Auckland Park by Olufundo Akinduro. She is the head of the elections and political processes at the Electoral Institute for Sustainable Democracy in Africa, ASA. Good evening to you. Thank you so much for coming through.
Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, firstly, I think it's important for you to school us a little bit on your mandate really and what it entails.
Okay. Election observation has two sides to it. There's what you call citizen observation, which is really based more on the rights of citizens to participate in public affairs of their countries. So you would find South African citizens like the South African Council of Churches and some other groups, the South African Association of Lawyers and all that. These are citizen observers, and that's where their mandate comes from. As international observers, we have a slightly different mandate because the work we do is more of monitoring the international human rights framework. Also, a means of showing some level of international support for the process in a country and trying to contribute to citizens' confidence. There's something about when you go out and you are aware that there are other eyes like a third set of eyes watching the process. That gives some level of confidence, and that's part of what we contribute to.
Yes, indeed. And of course, I assume that your role is not necessarily confined to the voting day only. You were telling me off air that some of your members have been in the country since the end of last month. So talk to us about that. When do you usually arrive in the country?
Okay, so as international observers, we fully understand that elections are processes. It's not an event, although, of course, the most obvious is that day when everybody goes out to vote. But for instance, in the case of South Africa, this is a process that has been on for 5 years. If you ask anybody in the IEC, they'll tell you the minute the 2014 elections were over, the plans for
preparing for
2019 already started. So even as observers, we are conscious of that, and therefore our work, our assessment looks at it as a process. However, like you said, okay, so we've just been here, we came in April, but then we're going to issue a report that covers the entire process. How really do we do that? I mean, there's some level of research that goes into that. And the work we do starts from the basics of, number one, the legal framework. I don't have to be in South Africa to understand the legal framework of South Africa. The laws are publicly available. I also can follow the courts to know the kinds of judgments that have been issued, that have changed the legal framework. What are the new laws that have been passed ahead of the elections? We look at the laws, we look at the institutions, and then we now come to the procedures, which that's now the part where you can physically see what's going on.
Because the reality is, we've seen on a number of occasions, people have been complaining that observer missions, they would come, you know, just days before the elections, and soon after the elections, they will leave. So how do they even get to a point where they compile a report? Because, for instance, in some countries, we always see some contestations after the elections where, you know, there are disputes of the results and so on. And you find that the reports compiled by observer missions is always differ to what is actually happening on the ground.
Well, so let's start from how do we capture the whole process. So I've talked about the aspect of doing the research. There's also different types of observation. You have the short-term observation, which you would find people staying from between 10 to 14 days. And you have long-term. We've had countries where observers stay on the ground for up to a year. But, I mean, these have budgetary implications. So you would have long-term observers that stay up to 2 months or 3 months in a country to cover the longer parts of the processes. That's from the campaigns up to the complaints and appeals, so that when these contestations come up, like you're saying, the observers are there, they can follow the court processes, and they can see how that unfolds. For us as ISA, because our head office is here, we've been on the ground. We deployed a mission in 2016, and for us, this assessment we are taking on is, you know, it builds on the findings of the 2016 municipal elections. So our work is not disjointed, so to say. It's been an ongoing process.
Of,
yes, and we may not be there continuously. So what we also do is to deploy like smaller missions at different aspects of the process. So we'll deploy what we call a pre-election assessment, like during the registration. In some countries, we could even do it if it's a country where the campaigns start very early. You would have a mission to go there like for a week. They write some report, they go back, and then by the time the big missions that you can see come, we have like a whole work ahead, I mean, on ground already that we build on. So there's a team,
as you say, for short-term and long-term processes.
Absolutely.
But your report, correct me if I'm wrong, is due to be released on Friday. And the official results are only coming through on Saturday, and if everything goes according to plan on Saturday, but we are also expecting that to happen on Sunday. So why do you
choose Friday
a report before the actual release of the results?
Okay, so first is to say international observers. I'm not talking of the partisan observers, but professional, independent international observers don't have any stakes in the outcome of an election. We are more interested in the process that leads to the outcome. Our practice is to issue what we call a preliminary statement. So what we're releasing on Friday is not the report. It's not our final report. It's a preliminary statement. And usually we clarify in that statement to say this particular assessment is up until the close of voting, or in our case, we would have observers in the provincial aggregation centers on the 9th. So at least we can also make some comment on that. However, our final report, we try to release about 3 months after. So at least that gives us time to follow the processes that come in the post-election period.
Yeah, even if there may be some disputes to the election results, so you are able to follow that up. So a very quick one on this, we have to wrap now. How would you rate participatory democracy in Africa in general in terms of the protection of human rights and perhaps that of democratic institutions?
Well, that's an interesting question because, I mean, Africa, I can't just say Africa in one fell swoop because we have countries at different stages in their democratic development. But I mean, if you go with indexes such as the Mo Ibrahim or the Freedom House, indexes that talk about the state of democracy, it's been interesting because one year you find us really progressing and then another year it will be, oh, democracy is stalling.
Yeah.
So, but my sense is that democracy is really difficult to give, you know, one sweep of the brush across a continent.
Yeah.
I would say you look at each country and its development as you go.
So it fluctuates in a way.
That's the truth.
Right.
I find it difficult to talk about
It's still
democracy.
difficult to say if we're there already. It's a process for the African continent, so you say. Well, we'll leave this conversation here for now. Hopefully we'll have you back after the elections to talk about your preliminary report. Thank you so much for coming through.
Thank you so much for having me.
Many thanks there to Olufundo Aki Nduro. She's the head of elections and political processes at the Electoral Institute for Sustainable Democracy in Africa, talking to us about the role of election observers. We're taking a quick break here on The Globe. There's still so much more to come. Don't go away.
Years ago, it was a vote for hope, for a new nation. It was about rejoining the global family. This time, it's about bread and butter issues, about corruption, jobs, societal ills, and social cohesion. Then and now, always there, when South Africa decides.
The SABC News mobile app is your one-stop digital portal to all the news you need. Stay connected with the latest in breaking news. Watch the SABC News channel along with clips and live streams of all the big news events. And listen to all the SABC News radio stations live, including podcasts and much more. Simply download the SABC News app to your Android or iOS device from either the Play Store or the App Store. SABC News, independent, impartial.
Welcome back. Now, the Independent Electoral Commission has warned that disrupting an election is a criminal offence. The IEC was briefing the media about its readiness for tomorrow's election at the Results Operations Centre in Pretoria.
Officials say the special voting period has helped them to identify problems.
The stage is set for the country's 6th general election. More than 22,000 voting stations will open at 7 o'clock in the morning until 9 o'clock in the evening. The IEC is warning voters to be vigilant when exercising their right to vote and ensure that the ballot paper is stamped. 2 policemen will be deployed in each voting station.
Citizens are reminded that any disruption to elections constitutes a criminal offense. And our view is that enough protests have been had, people's issues have been heard. Now is the opportunity for the voter to express themselves.
The Commission is also satisfied with how the special votes were conducted. It says the Eastern Cape and Northwest provinces had a high number of home visits. However, political analysts are predicting a low voter turnout in this election. The Commission has urged the South Africans to go out in their numbers to cast their votes.
The Electoral Commission calls on every South African citizen to celebrate our 25th anniversary of democracy by ensuring tomorrow's election take place in the spirit of 1994.
Home Affairs offices will be opened on voting day to allow people to collect their IDs. Lula Mamatya, SABC News at the Results Operations Center.
And as we've been saying, that it's just under 10 hours to go before the South Africa's 6th democratic election starts. The Home Affairs Department is extending its operating hours to allow eligible voters to collect their identity documents. Thousands of smart card IDs remain uncollected at the Home Affairs offices around the country. But to talk to us more about this, we joined via Skype by the department's Acting Director General, Thulani Mavuso. DG, good evening to you. Thank you so much for joining us here on The Globe. Now, the department is to extend operating hours. Give us the details.
Good evening to the viewers. We indeed started yesterday with our hours, where we operated till 7 o'clock night on Monday. We also did the same. And basically what we saw last night was that the people were coming in our offices even at 5 to 7. So what we have said to this morning is that we're going to allow people to come into the office till 7 o'clock, and then staff and finish all the clients who are in the office up until 8 o'clock. So that has been happening throughout the 2 days, and the numbers were quite. You saw I was in Randburg yesterday till very late today. I was at Barak Street office in Cape Town. So tomorrow we're going to open it from 7 o'clock and till 9 o'clock. So what we were doing is that we were offering a full set, just only limited to temporary IDs. But for tomorrow, we do want our people to say as much as that we want, but we want to prioritize those who want to collect the purposes of voting, prioritize for those who have ID. Because they either lost their ID, can't find it. So that's what we are talking.
Yeah. So how is it going to work? Is there perhaps any set of documents that they may have to bring, or is it just going to be ID numbers that they need to know?
Well, you need to know your ID number, because we're going to use, obviously, we use our biometrics to validate that that's they are. So we just don't issue out like that, but we have to validate our biometrics. So basically, biometrics, and when we verify, and then issue the temporary ID certificate.
Yeah. So in terms of the cost, DG, obviously there's an amount of how much? 140 rands that one has to pay for an ID?
Well, the ID is 140 rand, the smart card ID, but for the temporary certificate, we charge an amount of 70 rands.
Mm. Do you not see this as denying those who cannot afford to get this temporary ID to pay that 70 rands? What happens if they don't have the money now as it is? Because we do know, of course, it's not everyone who's who can be able to make that payment.
But in reality, what happens is that when a person pays first time, they get it free. So the state has provided enabling documents to every citizen for the first time for free. That's the one point. The second point is that we have had a lot of people who were affected by various aspects. In Cape Town here in Denon, Khayelitsha, hundreds of cases that were brought to me. Even tomorrow, a number of free. But those...
No, unfortunately, we have to cut out of that particular interview. Really, sound is extremely bad, but the message is clear. The Home Affairs Department will be open tomorrow. If you need to go collect your ID, or if you need your temporary ID document, you can go to the department's offices near you, and that you'll get, of course, at a cost of 70 rands. Apologies, really. That line was very bad to the Director General of the Department of Home Affairs, Thulani Mavuso, joining us live via Skype. Simpiwe?
Well, thanks, Palisa. We're still discussing the elections tomorrow. And joining me now is political analyst Professor Tinyiko Maluleke. He's joining us now live from Pretoria. Very good evening to you, Professor. Thank you so much for joining us. Now, since the year started, we've seen about 62 service delivery protests across the country in the run-up to these elections. And we've seen so many South Africans and so many communities saying that they will definitely withhold their vote. I mean, is this the means of addressing their grievances?
Well, I think it is a desperate effort by communities to get the attention of the political leadership in the country and the attention of government. It is desperate, it is too late, and it is probably not going to get them the results they need. But I think we have to read it as a desperate attempt to get attention after waiting for so many years for the services that they protest about. I am not sure that the election is the best bargaining chip for these kinds of things. I think we should be engaging government and holding them accountable long before the election date.
You talk of the community members and potential voters. I mean, this as as an attention-seeking quest to their political leaders. How then can we interpret communities disengaging from the whole election process in the context of participatory democracy?
Well, again, it's not just mere attention-seeking in the infantile, emotional sense of the word. These are serious problems that communities have, and it is misplaced, unfortunately, to think that boycotting elections is a way of getting a message across. It's counterproductive, actually. Not only do we have a participatory democracy, we actually have a proportional representation system, which means that every vote counts, and the number of votes, the number of people who turn out is going to determine the cost of a seat in parliament. It's also going to determine the numbers that different political parties are able to field, and therefore the shape and form of parliament is going to be affected by people not turning out.
You know, in the 25 years since the dawn of democracy, Professor, do you think that South Africa's electorate vote according to the party's policies, or are they at all convinced with the political parties' manifestos? I mean, do they really take stock of what the parties have done in the 5-year period in between elections when they cast their ballots?
I think we have matured as a nation, and I think that in these elections, we have seen communities engaging more and more with issues and less with personalities. They may not be engaging the issues in the precise manner in which we would like them to, but certainly the politics are no longer just about personalities to the same extent that they used to be. That's the one thing. But the other thing is, manifestos are, of course, important for political parties, but South African voters have had a windfall of manifestos, formal and informal. They've had the Zondo Commission, they've had the Life Esidimeni, they've had the PIC Commission, the Nugent Commission, the VBS saga. All of these have given them enough information on which to make decisions as they vote tomorrow.
We have the longest ballot paper in the history of South Africa's democracy. What conclusions can you make about our own journey as a country based on this fact? What do you read into this?
It will certainly make the queues longer and slower tomorrow, unfortunately, so South Africans will have to be patient. I have a sense that the voters will send a message to the political parties about the number of parties. One way of doing that is if indeed the many smaller parties are annihilated and eliminated by voters simply not voting for them, that will be a message that South Africans can do with fewer parties than 48.
All right, we'll certainly be waiting and seeing that fact tomorrow. Professor, thank you so much for your time. We appreciate it. That was Professor Tinyuka Maluleke speaking to us live from our studios in Pretoria.
All right, and of course, that's where we'll leave it for this hour. Do stay tuned. We'll have more news for you at the top of the hour here on the SABC News Channel.
Indeed, Palisa. This is The Globe. Thanks for watching.